Our hero is an ordinary student who, one day, along with his sister, is surprised by the spread of a sex scandal involving their father, in which he is wrongfully accused. However, people blame the hero and his sister, and the hero is bullied and severely beaten without mercy. Even his sister was not spared from this bullying. In the midst of these events, their father commits suicide, making matters worse. However, the hero discovers a strange power that enables him to exonerate his father and take revenge on everyone who harmed him. Yuki's story begins with a scene showing the exact moment Yuki saw the status screen for the first or second time, demanding that he decide to either gain power or lose his chance at becoming stronger forever. Determined to change the situation of his life, even if it means selling his soul to the devil, Yuki accepted his new power and became much stronger in an instant. A few months earlier, when Yuki Jinbo was still a weakling who ran away at the sight of trouble, his father, a renowned and popular detective, caused a huge scandal that made the headlines for several days. One day, while making their way out of their house to get to school, Yuki and his sister, Jinbo Yui, ran into a horde of vicious media bastards, who were already stationed at the entrance to interview the children of the infamous, perverted detective, who was caught taking an underage person into a hotel. For a moment, Yuki and Yui try to keep their heads down and mouths shut, as they try to ignore all the terrifying questions those disgruntled journalists had for them. Unfortunately, when he can't take the pressure anymore, Yuki finally folds and tells one of the journalists that their father was at home. Just as he's about to say something else, the journalists demand that he either bring his father out of the house or apologize to the public on his behalf. By this time, Yui tries to apologize to the public, but before she can even let out a proper apology, the journalists tell her about the rumors they've heard about her having a sexual relationship with her father on social media. Unable to take the humiliation anymore, poor Yui just runs away in shame. But as for her big brother, Yuki, he bows toward the army of foxes and apologizes sincerely, this time, for his father's mistakes. Rather than accept his apology, the journalists instantly call him hurtful names like shameless bastard and powerless cunt. And Yuki, who can clearly hear the journalists' words, starts wondering why he's being like this when he didn't do anything wrong. These past few days, the mass media, video streamers, and weekly magazines have all been on his father's tail, and are willing to stop at nothing, using even children as materials to bash an easy target of evil. Soon after humiliating the lives of Yuki and his sister, the journalists finally leave to continue their daily tasks. Some hours later, after school, Yuki gets harassed on his way home by two useless bastards, demanding money from the son of the perverted cop. When Yuki tells both of them that he has no money, knowing internally that he didn't do anything wrong to deserve such bullying, both guys get disgusted at the broke and weak Yuki for being so pathetic. As such, they beat the shit out of him, and then show the viral photo of his father leading a little girl into the hotel, just to embarrass the hell out of him. Just as Yuki's about to respond to them, one of the bullies holds him by his hair, throws a few more insults at him, and gets ready to beat him up a second time. Thankfully, before that happens, their gang leader, Akira Kume, shows up and asks the bullies if they were able to get any money from Yuki this time. The moment he gets his answer, which is a no, Kume faces Yuki, making sure he's their right target, and then tells him that since he has no money to give them, he'll just have to entertain them differently by being their toy for the rest of his pathetic life. At this point, Yuki fears for his future, as the harsh reality of his situation dawns on him. If he doesn't do something about these bastards now, then he can kiss his future goodbye. For now, though, the three bullies decide to stop beating the guy up, so they leave him lying on the street and walk away to have some barbecue. Moments before Yuki gets up to return home, a game-like holographic message pop-up box suddenly appears to inform him that he's been chosen as the host of the Toshin Bandit. At first, Yuki gets a little confused about the whole message system pop-up thing, but eventually, when he starts walking back home, he wonders if the screen he's seeing was something from some kind of game. Soon enough, he gets back home, ignores the message box, and finds his sister right at the entrance of their house, trying to clean up all the disgusting messages and letters people have left in front of their home. Upon welcoming each other back home, Yuki tells his stressed sister to let him take care of cleaning all this trash in front of their house while she makes dinner for the three of them. While they're busy doing their chores before dinner, Yuki thinks about the peaceful life they had, way before their dad got himself in a scandalous situation. As it turns out, after their mother died, their dad raised them all by himself without ever complaining once. One day, when Yuki was paying his respects to his deceased mother, his father came by, patted him on the shoulder, and urged him to get himself busy so their mother won't worry about them from heaven. Although the Jinbo's family wasn't rich at all, Yuki says they lived supporting each other dearly, like a real family should. Back then, his dad rarely spent time with him due to the nature of his job as a detective. But even so, Yuiki admired his very existence up until the day the photo circulated on social media. According to his story, his dad lost his mind ever since that day, simply because the poor detective knew that he was being framed by his enemies, but couldn't prove it. By dinner time, Yuiki and Yui visit their dad in his room upstairs to try and serve him some food. Unfortunately, when they get there and try to get him to down some food, their father, who's already lost his mind, keeps on repeating the words, "I didn't do it," all while ignoring his children's pleas to eat some food, till he finally snaps. Suddenly, the poor man throws the food his daughter cooked for him off the table, and nearly hits her, as if she were the one who leaked the photo online. To prevent any more trouble, Yuiki steps in to hold his dad down till he calms himself. Eventually, when his dad calms down, he goes on to check up on Yui to make sure she's doing okay. Although the poor girl claims to be okay, Yuiki can clearly see the look of disgust on his sister's face. So, in an attempt to pacify her, he tries letting her know that there's a possibility their dad might be innocent. Even still, Yui, who seems to think her dad's gone crazy, urges her brother never to believe what their dad says anymore, all because he's no longer sane. Confused, Yuiki asks Yui if she's sure their dad would really do such a thing. But before Yui can answer, one of the bullies from earlier shows up at Yuiki's house and invites him outside to play a little. Initially, Yuki tells him it's already late and that he won't be able to play. But then the bully shows him a video of him getting humiliated by them, and promises to release it if he doesn't come outside to play with him. Left with no other choice, Yuiki follows the bully out to a random lamp post and listens to the fat bastard apologize for having to drag him out this late at night. Thereafter, he demands to get some more money from Yuiki, and Yuiki tells him he has nothing to give. Almost instantly, the fat bastard lands a heavy punch on Yuiki, and beats the living shit out of him for even thinking he can refuse to give him some money in the first place. After some back and forth arguments between the two, the bully holds Yuiki by his hair, just as he usually does, and forces some sand inside his mouth, so Yuiki can stop talking. At this point, the pop-up status screen appears a second time in front of Yuiki, with a message advising him to change his life with his abilities, while also explaining why he's such a weakling. And Yuiki, who's busy spitting out the sand, wonders what the fuck the system wants him to do. As the bully notices Yuiki's split attention, the system message gives him one last chance to gain power or stay weak forever, and Yuiki, not caring to be mocked by the system, decides to gain the game-like abilities to gain his edge in life. The moment he taps yes, the system grants him the hunt skill, talent, theft, which allows him to steal the status of one person per day in his field of vision, and Yuiki gets himself ready to begin his new path of life as a strong individual. As soon as he acquires this new power, Yuiki, fully determined to change his life, faces the bully and challenges him to come at him. As the bully continues yapping, Yuiki, while trying to figure out the terminology on the screen, suddenly spots the system calculating his status. In no time, he gets to see how terrible his combat, power, defense, agility, and charisma stat values all are, with many of them being at F rank. Shocked by how low his ability values are, Yuiki decides to scan the bully's status so he can see the difference in their ability values. However, just as he's about to start the scan, the bully punches him hard on the mouth for looking away, and then warns him never to do such ever again. Soon after receiving the punch, Yuiki scans the bastard and soon realizes that the differences in their ability values are pretty high. Just then, the bully continues kicking him in the belly, as he urges poor Yuiki to come at him, just like he said he would. Amid the beating, Yuiki finally gets the conditions to be met to activate the power, which is to touch the opponent with his palm. So, while the bully continues thumping his feet hard on Yuiki's face, telling him not to act all cocky like his life suddenly means something, Yuiki waits for the right moment to touch the guy's leg and fight back. Moments before he gets his chance, the bully, right after spitting out more insults at Yuiki, takes out his phone and shows Yuiki a video of his sister being bullied hard at her school. Having seen the horrible things his sister is enduring back at school, Yuiki begs the bully to let Yui go since she has nothing to do with whatever's happening to their family. Sadly, the bully, who happens to think that family should share collective responsibility, tells Yuiki that he might consider being nice to him and his sister if Yuiki can apologize for his father's wrongdoings. As Yuiki remains silent, the fat bastard continues telling him that his life isn't his anymore, but theirs to have their fun with when they feel like it. Soon enough, the guy tries to force Yuki to admit to being bottom-tier scum, but then Yuki, while thinking internally, refuses to believe that his life belongs to society. The moment bro starts declaring his life to be his, he touches the bully on his foot, activates his ability, hunt, skill, talent, theft, and lands a devastating sucker punch on the bully's mouth. Thereafter, landing the punch, he steals the bully's combat and power ability values, upgrading his stats to D and E, respectively, and then uses the same skill to downgrade the bully's combat power all the way down to F. Shortly afterward, Yuki faces his arch-nemesis for the night, which is the bully, and commands him to come face him. And the bully, still recovering from the punch, asks Yuki why he's getting cocky all of a sudden, refusing to even let the bastard say a word. Yuki lands a few more sucker punches on the stupid fat bully, feeling amazed by his new power the entire time, and then ends up kicking the fool to the ground when he's done punching him. At this point, the bully, who can barely keep his words straight, starts trying to figure out what could have happened to make Yuki this strong. Rather than answer the bully's stupid questions, Yuki holds the fool by his hair, the exact way he held his earlier, tells the bully, with rage in his eyes, that this beating isn't enough to take him down yet, and then punches the apologetic bully so much that bro passes out immediately. When he's done beating up the bully, Yuki catches his breath and says a few things about the amazing experience he just had while beating the bully up. Just then, the system message box pops up again, but this time, it informs Yuki that he's unlocked a new quest. Though shocked, Yuki continues reading the slides and soon finds out about the reward ability for completing the quest, which is acquiring the endless fighting spirit skill, as well as the conditions to complete the quest, which is to expose his father's truth. In other words, Yuki is to expose his father's truth if he wants to pass this new quest and gain the endless fighting spirit ability as his reward. On his way back home, Yuki spends his time thinking about the talent theft ability he used earlier in his fight against the bully, and wonders if he can truly steal a person's status ability values just by touching them with his hand. Well, now that he knows that he can get abilities each time he clears certain conditions, Yuki glances at his ability chart and soon finds out that there are many more abilities that he's yet to unlock. Happy to see this, Yuki finally gets that sliver of hope that he may be able to escape his hellish life with the power he unlocks over time after all. However, the next acquisition condition, which is to expose his father's truth, is a little confusing because bro really doesn't understand what his dad's truth really is. With no other choice but to ask his father himself, Yuki quickly returns home, not knowing what's waiting for him there. The moment he gets back home, Yuki tries calling his sister and dad, but unfortunately, he doesn't get any responses from either of them. When he gets up to his father's room upstairs, Yuki sees some strange liquid spilling out from under the room's doorway, and fears the impossible has happened. Just then, he opens the door to his father's room, hoping to find his father dead drunk and pissing himself. But sadly, Yuki finds his father's lifeless body hanging from a noose he tied on the ceiling. By the time Yuki realizes that his father is unalived himself, he screams so loudly that his blood-curdling screams could be heard dozens of meters away. Some nights after the detective's death, Yuki and his sister cremate their father at a funeral home and pay their respects before returning to their lives. While they observe their silence, with poor Yui sobbing softly over the loss of her father, Yuki, on the other hand, is seen wondering why his father unalived himself at the worst possible time of their lives. As he racks his brains for answers, his friend, Jinta, who's apparently the only person who attended the funeral with them, shows up to comfort the grieving kids. Upon seeing his friend right there with them, Yuki thanks Jinta for showing them some support, but then Jinta, with an odd look on his face, tells Yuki that he just came by to tell them that he'll be waiting for them at school as usual. When Yuki thanks him once again for his unending support, Jinta points at the ring in Yuki's hands and asks him about it. While Yuki nonchalantly tells him it's his dad's wedding ring, citing that he intends to keep it, he suddenly hears some people around them telling each other that his father's death meant he's admitted to the incident. Thankfully, before he causes another incident, Jinta urges him to stop worrying about those assholes, and Yuki follows his friend's advice. As he continues thinking about the new quest he received a few nights ago, the one about exposing his father's truth, another bully shows up at the funeral home and makes fun of Yuki's father's death. Shocked to see such a bastard in such an odd place, Yuki gets defensive and asks the fool to explain why he's come there. To avoid fighting in a funeral home, the useless bully urges Yuki to chill out and instead try looking outside to see the surprise he has for him. The moment Yuki peeks outside the glass entrance door, he spots the vultures, aka journalists, gathering outside the funeral hall, just waiting for him to come out and fall into their trap, just like before. As Yuki stands there, shocked to see the reporters, the hapless bastard near him starts talking shit about the journalists, and the weird things they had to say about his father committing suicide. Suddenly, then, in a fit of rage, Yuki gets outside the funeral hall, and asks the bastard why there are reporters outside when he's made sure nobody knew his father was already dead. Before engaging in Yuki's question, the bully urges him to go save his sister, who's already surrounded by the vultures. But before Yuki can even attempt to save Yui, the reporters start asking her very off-putting questions about her feelings towards her father's death. Thankfully, before his sister suffers even more humiliation in the hands of the reporters, Yuiki blocks her from the cameras and calls the vultures out for being assholes, trying to prey on orphans. Around this same time, one of the reporters tells Yuiki that since his father committed suicide, they have every right to interrogate them. Hearing this, Yuiki calls them scum for thinking like that, but then the reporters, who have morals, call their parents scum before they continue asking them other demeaning questions. After a few more minutes of enduring such bullshit from the media, Yui just snaps, and unable to take it anymore, walks away from her brother and the crowd. Ignoring the incessant questions from the media, Yuiki returns to the funeral hall, finds his sister sitting on the floor with her face planted in her knees, and asks if she's okay. The moment he sits near her, Yui asks him if he's doing okay, but then Yuiki tells her that he's not doing okay at all, which is normal. Seconds later, Yui stares at her brother with a scary look on her face, and then tells him that she's pretty sure he committed the sexual crimes and left them behind to face the music by killing himself. Shocked to hear this from his sister, Yuiki tries correcting her understanding of things. But then again, Yui just tells him that she's relieved that their father is finally dead. At this point, Yuiki flares up and asks Yui why she chooses not to believe their dad, who's been a good person to them the entire time. Instead of replying to his question, Yui just continues sobbing and asking Yuiki to tell her why their dad had to die instead of clearing his name. Before Yuiki answers her, she asks him one more time if he truly believes that their father is innocent of the crimes he's accused of, but Yuiki, just as he's about to respond, spots a message box popping up and reminding him about the quest he's yet to complete, and finally decides to believe in the message board. Soon after returning home, Yuiki decides to take a stroll outside to investigate the weird message. This system thingy keeps telling him about his father's truth. Somewhere along the line, Yuki overhears the fat bully and the second guy from the funeral hall saying more derogatory things about him, and decides to hide at a corner and eavesdrop. Eventually, he overhears them talking about his father's suicide, as well as the ruthless way Akira Kume, their gang leader, fabricated the sexual crimes against Yuiki's father. By this time, Yuiki, realizing that his father's been innocent the entire time, calls the two goons and asks them to spill out what their gang leader, Kume, did to his father's reputation. As both goons beat around the bush, asking Yuiki to explain why he's being cocky, Yuiki sizes up their ability, values, and figures he doesn't have that much of a fighting chance because he can only steal one person's status and make them weak. Despite all the odds stacked up against him, Yuiki refuses to back down and instead takes a fighting stance to beat both guys down. When the funeral hall bully swings at him, Yuiki dodges the punch, touches the guy's body, activates the talent theft skill, and steals the guy's combat power. Before the funeral hall bully can react, Yuiki punches the shit out of the bozo, knocking him out for a second, and then gets himself ready to face the other guy. Before long, the other guy slams his fists at the back of Yuiki's head, and although Yuiki ignores the pain, he does get a little distracted for a second, as he tries to steal the fat bastard's ability stats one more time. Just then, the funeral home bully he previously knocked down suddenly gets back up, noticing Yuiki's distraction, bashes Yuiki's head with a small rock he found nearby, and leaves the poor guy bleeding with a little fracture in his skull. Upon getting hit in the head, Yuiki stays quietly on the ground, struggling to stay awake. As both bullies continue mocking him, refusing to lose consciousness just yet, Bro grabs one of the bullies by the leg and tells him to explain what Kume did to his dad. With nothing else to lose, the funeral hall bully tells him that Kume fabricated sexual crimes against his father because he was being a pain in the arse to their operation. As the bullies continue mocking the detective and his good-for-nothing son, Yuiki finally completes his quest to expose his dad's truth and receives the new ability, Endless Fighting Spirit, which is an ability that allows him to steal status from people in his field of vision consecutively. With this new power, Yuiki gets back on his feet, refusing to collapse just yet, and decides to make the bullies pay for their crimes against his father's name. Moments before Yuiki gets into another fight with the bullies, one of them narrates what the detective did to make Kume go so far just to ruin his life forever. It all began one night some months ago, when the detective caught Kume and his goons in an alleyway sharing what seemed to be a new Zaza substance they called a gummy. Apparently, Kume wanted his goons to distribute the new high at school, so they could easily skyrocket their profit. But eventually, before they could go far, the detective figured them out to be the source of substances circulating the streets, and let them know that it's over for them. Since he clearly just saw the handoff between all of them, to keep their secret hidden, Kume attacked Yuki's father, but the detective, ever so strong, easily overpowered the big hunk of muscle, and placed him under arrest for aiding the distribution of Zaza. Despite getting locked up, Kume still refused to give up on his life of crime. However, he does know that he needs to get rid of Yuki's father if his new substance distribution is to grow. So, what does he do? Well, he simply works with his goons on the outside and makes one of them get a female high schooler to force herself on Yuki's dad and lead him into a hotel, somehow, so they can get an incriminating photo of him. When the girl refuses to frame the good man, the goons, who are fully ready to follow Kira's orders, threaten to post the lady's nudes online. So this makes the girl act accordingly. With the stage set, Kume and his goons lie and wait for the right time to strike the detective. One random night, the female high schooler appears very scared before Yuki's dad, looking rough with her clothes torn, and says nothing. Before long, the detective notices her demeanor and instantly knows something's wrong. So he asks the girl to tell him everything that's happened to her. Realizing that the detective is her target, she holds him frantically and tells him that her boyfriend is trying to force her to drink something shaped like a gummy worm. Being the kind-hearted detective that he is, Yuki's dad didn't see the deception coming at all. As the girl walks him toward her non-existent boyfriend's location, the funeral home bully recorded the entire interaction, edited out the good parts of the video, and sent the incriminating video to Kume and his boss, currently in prison. The moment Kume got the video, he knew it was all over, as he screenshotted the infamous picture from the recording and posted it online as an anonymous person. With all that said, the funeral home bully stops the storytelling and continues speaking awful things about Yuki's deceased dad. At this point, Yuki knows there's no saving these bastards anymore. So he racks his brain to figure out the best ability value to steal next, especially now that he's upped his attack power. As the goons continue yapping demeaning things at Yuki suddenly realizes that his defense power is much lower than theirs, meaning, if he were to get into a fight with them, then he'll be mincemeat in a jiffy. Knowing this, Yuki mumbles some things to himself about stealing and weakening their defense power next. But just then, the funeral home bully swings a punch right at Yuki's face. Luckily for him, he manages to steal the bastard's defense power just in time to block the bastard's punch. Right after protecting himself from the fool's punch, Yuki gives the guy an uppercut that knocks him out cold instantly. With the first one down, he turns to the fat bastard, who keeps trying to call his buddy, Jun, who's currently knocked down from Yuki's punch, back up. When Jun doesn't respond to the bastard's call, he knows he is cooked, as Yuki's death stare melts him from the inside out. To avoid getting beaten up like his friend, the fat bastard, after failing to calm Yuki down, goes down on all fours and begs Yuki for forgiveness. At this point, Yuki just stares down at the fool, and lets him know that no matter how much he apologizes, he's not going to be forgiven, because that won't bring his dad back at all. Soon after, Yuki mutters a few things in his mind, grabs the fat bastard by his hair, and, while ignoring the pleas from the idiot to have mercy on him, smashes the guy's face into the concrete pavement. Thereafter, he receives a new quest to publicly declare his father's truth, for a chance to get the skill, Ability Borrowing. Now, Ability Borrowing, according to the system, is a skill that lets him temporarily steal an opponent's skills for his personal use, all while making him unable to use his other abilities. By this time, Yuki figures new quests will probably appear moments after he completes the existing one, but then again, to complete this one, he knows he has to confront the root of all evil himself, Kume Akira. Now that he knows that his dad was deceived by that bastard, Yuki is determined to make Kume publicly declare the truth by all means necessary. Around that same time, Kume, who also attends the same high school as Yuki and his sister, is seen chilling out on Jinta's seat, waiting for his guys to come pay in their profits from their daily substance sales. Along the line, Jinta shows up and asks Kume to kindly let him have his seat back. The moment Kume gives Jinta the death stare, Jinta apologizes and lets the fool do what he wants. Just then, Yuki gets into class without thinking and asks Kume if he knows about his deceased detective father. When Kume calls Yuki's father a stupid detective who offed himself, Yuki takes a fighting stance and gets himself ready to fight the bastard. Thankfully, before letting his buddy kill himself, Jinta steps in and tries to get Yuki to calm down, so he doesn't start a fight he can't survive. In his words, Yuki tells Jinta, while making the angriest face possible, that he's only trying to get revenge for his father, who was brutally framed for something he didn't do. At that point, Kume, who gets in the mood for a fight, gets up, stares down at Yuki, who just scanned his ability values, and tells the kid that his father's suicide isn't his fault. Refusing to back down, Yuki accuses the gang leader of killing his dad, and then promises to make sure he admits it with his mouth, no matter how strong he claims to be. However, moments before his battle with the gang leader himself, begins, Yuuki takes another trip down memory lane to remember just how peaceful life was before this bastard in front of him took everything away. Yuuki's memory recollection begins on a random morning in the past, when his sister angrily woke him up to have breakfast before getting to school. Although the day was as happy as any other day, Yui, the angry bird, wasn't so happy, as she scolds Yuuki for always relying on her too much to wake him up for school. Even when Yuuki nonchalantly told her not to get too angry, Yui snapped and told him he was the only person making her get angry every morning. Luckily for Yuuki, before a saucepan hits his head, their father came home from work, as usual, and intervened in the siblings' fight, just like he does every other morning. Before letting the siblings continue their fight, Dad settled by the breakfast table to have something light with his kids before releasing them for school. Back then, eating breakfast together every day was the one family rule no one dared to break. Not even Dad. So, after saying their prayers, all three dug in to eat the breakfast Yui cooked for all of them. Amid breakfast, Dad compliments the deliciousness of the food, and even says something about Yui surpassing her mom already. Sadly, just when Yui's about to feel good, Yuki tells her she's still lacking with the miso soup she made, and the sibling banter continues at the breakfast table. Soon after bringing his kids back to order, Dad takes a bowl of rice to their mother's picture and urn, and wishes her a good morning, treating her as if she were still there with them. Once the kids also pay their respects to their mother, Dad hurries them to school, so they leave shortly after, having remembered just how happy he used to be with his family of three. Before Akira destroyed everything, Yuuki gets even angrier at his pathetic life, as he promises never to forgive the S-rank fighter standing in front of him. By this time, Akira, who's already geared up for a good time with his pet, shouts at Yuuki to come at him, and the dumbass, who didn't know his place, takes a swing at Akira. When Akira nonchalantly dodges his punch, Yuuki appears very shocked. But despite failing his first attempt to bring Akira down, Yuuki still had faith that he'd be able to steal Akira's ability values just by touching him. So, when Akira expresses his disappointment at Yuuki's powerlessness, claiming that whatever he just did isn't even considered a warm-up, Yuuki regains his fighting stance and decides to do his best to steal Akira's stats, even if there's a huge difference between them. By this time, Akira, who's noticed Yuuki staring at something in front of him, encourages him to entertain him more, and Yuuki, eager to entertain this bastard, suddenly hugs Akira, making sure to touch him with his palm. Seconds after touching Akira, Yuuki activates the talent theft skill to take some of Akira's ability values. But to his dismay, the skill doesn't activate at all, and Yuuki soon finds out that it's because both his skills can't be used to steal stats from other skill holders. As Yuuki tries to figure out what the system means by other skill holders, Akira gives him a devastating uppercut that sends him crashing into some desks behind him. Thereafter, Akira tells the utterly confused Yuuki, who's still trying to figure out why he can't steal from the bastard, that, just like him, he also can release potential and raise his status to maximum. In other words, for Yuuki to steal Akira's status, he must steal the ability or skill itself. At this point, poor Yuuki finally realizes that others have abilities besides him. Unfortunately for him, his misfortune doesn't end there at all, because Akira continues beating the living crap out of the poor guy, while he racks his brain to figure out why other people also have abilities. At one point in their fight, Akira, seeing that Yuuki isn't used to fighting, kicks his stomach, as Yuuki wonders what he can do without abilities, and urges the downed high schooler to entertain him more. When Yuuki doesn't budge, Akira picks him up, spins him around, and smashes him against some desks nearby. Thankfully, Yuuki survives the crash, but this time around, his haughty, mighty attitude from the beginning disappears, as Bro stares at the blood gushing out of his head, wound, and pouring onto his palm. Before leaving the poor guy, Akira tells him he's still a toy in the end, despite having received some abilities to make him stronger, and urges him to learn from this. Unable to do anything else, Yuuki collapses to the ground as Akira disappears into the entrance door. Soon after the fight, Jinta rushes to check up on Yuuki and carry him to the nurse's office. In his subconscious, Yuuki finds his inner self promising to do anything to acquire enough power to kill Akira if he can. Just when he begs for a new ability, a masked man with a wide grin on his face, identified as Taoshin's bandit, appears before Yuuki's subconscious and urges him not to be too impatient, as he'll get the power he wants very soon. A few hours later, Yuuki sees Akira's smug face in his dream, and suddenly jerks back awake to find himself in the school's infirmary with his sister, Yui, sitting right beside him, happy to finally see her brother awake. Yui welcomes him back and tells him Jinta was the one who carried him back to the sick bay after he got into a fight at school. When she notices Yuuki wincing in pain, Yui gets up to get him a compress and urges him not to move a muscle. While she's gone, Yuuki finally realizes that he's lost against the skill holder, Akira. As the memories of the beating flood his head, Yuki thinks about Akira being an ability user, takes a look at his ability chart, spots other locked abilities, and figures he can use other skills, like this ability, borrowing, to win against other ability users like Akira by stealing their abilities themselves. Unfortunately, Bro has no clue how to clear the conditions to unlock the ability borrowing skill, especially now that he's found out the hard way that he can't force Akira to say it. Determined, Yuuki decides to do something to acquire the skill, so he can nullify Akira's power and beat the shit out of him. However, just as he begins thinking about how to clear those conditions, he suddenly hears his sister's voice outside their house, begging one live streamer who claims to come from the Yamasato prefecture to let her go. Against her will, the hapless Nimrod of a live streamer begins his so-called justice streaming and introduces the daughter of the infamous perverted detective as his guest speaker. Apparently, the asshole seeks to interrogate Yui and cause her to admit to everyone that her dad did indeed commit the sexual crimes. Tired of having to deal with these media vultures, Yuuki gives the bastard a chance to stop this madness and go home. However, as with all idiots, the streamer refuses to back down, as he also blames Yuuki for his dad's crime and death. When Yuuki tries explaining to the guy that they've done nothing wrong, the useless streamer points the camera at Yuki's face and tells him to officially apologize on his father's behalf if he wants people to have any sympathy for him. As the pressure builds up, with Yui crying profusely and begging everyone to stop, Yuuki decides that enough is enough. So, he grabs the guy's phone camera, places his face within the frame, and then screams out the real truth this time, telling everyone that he now has proof that his dad never committed any sexual crimes, but was framed and killed by a third party who wanted him gone from law enforcement. Soon after uttering those words, Yuuki unlocks the skill, ability, borrowing, and finally realizes what the conditions of the quest really meant. As for the streamer, who didn't expect Yuuki to say such a thing, he nearly has a meltdown and eventually ends up promising his viewers to punish the liar. Right after placing his phone down, the streamer takes out his knife, utters some demeaning words at Yuuki about him and his sister becoming the media's toys, and tries to attack him. Upon scanning the guy's ability values, Yuuki gets a little disappointed over the streamer's stupidity and weakness, so he wastes no time using his abilities and beats the shit out of the loser till he's knocked out. Once he's taken care of the loser, Yuuki walks back home with his sister, clearly shocked at how many times he's had to fight recently. However, before they go far, another ability user corners them up front, identifies Yuuki as a strong ability user, and introduces his skill, Panicking World, to the duo. Almost instantly, Yuuki gets a sensation of being held down by invisible chains, making his body stiff and unable to move. Around that time, the guy, upon reminding Yuuki that his ability can't be used without touching, explains that his Panicking World allows him to invoke fear in people within a certain range, so people can't move. With all that said, the disgusting fool grabs Yui, salivating over her beauty and freshness, and knocks her out after telling Yuuki how eager he is to get a taste of his sister's body for himself. To avoid getting scolded by his boss, the pig just carries Yui on his shoulder and leaves for their lair. When Yuuki asks him why he's doing this, the man turns back and tells him it's because they have no other means if they're to win the Olympus front. By this time, Yuuki appears even more confused because this is the first time he's ever heard anything about an Olympus front. Notwithstanding, Yuuki understands that he can't let this predator take away the only family he has left. So, he grabs the streamer's knife on the floor and inflicts pain on himself to shake off the invoked fear from the pig's ability. Moments after leaving Yuuki behind, the disgusting pig, who's still on his way back to the lair, complains about his boss being too selfish and keeping Yui all to himself. Soon after checking Yui's cute face and soft body, he decides to have just a little taste, as he feels it won't be noticed. Thankfully, before that happens, Yuuki appears behind him and orders the pig to settle whatever business he has with his family, with him, and not his sister. Before the pig can react, Yuuki kicks the guy in the mouth and grabs his sister from his arms. When the pig regains consciousness, he stares at Yuuki's bleeding arm and figures that Yuuki must have nullified the fear invoked by his ability with pain. As for Yuuki, who refuses to lose any more precious people in his life, he instantly activates his new skill, ability borrowing, and promises to use this power to protect his family from useless bastards like the pig standing in front of him. With all that said, Yuuki turns his back against the idiot, who's currently wondering how Yuuki fought his ability with pain, and places Yui gently on the ground. Once he's sure that his sister's safe, He invokes the guy's same ability, the panicking world, on him and locks the guy's limbs in place with the invisible chains, just like the guy did to him earlier. Almost instantly, the guy feels his entire body getting stiff, unable to move, and then, with terror on his face, asks Yuuki why he's using his own ability against him. Knowing fully well that he's locked the bastard in place, Yuuki approaches him, with immense rage in his eyes, and tells the guy to his face that he doesn't understand anything, while trying to make him understand that the fear created by his ability can't compare to the pain of losing a family member. Yuuki kicks the shit out of the pig, grabs him by his hair, and then slams his head face first into the concrete. As soon as the system confirms his victory against the ability user, it unlocks a brand new skill for Yuuki. Although Yuuki's shocked to see this happening, the skill, which is unnamed at the time, can help Yuuki unlock higher tier abilities just by touching other abilities. As if that wasn't enough, 3 other skills pop up in front of Yuuki, alongside the conditions needed to unlock them all. And this makes Yuuki wonder why these 3 abilities are suddenly being revealed. Eventually, it all clicks in Yuuki's head, as he finally realizes that it must be because he just defeated an ability user for the first time. Unlike the other bullies he's used to beating, this one's an ability user, so it must mean that one can unlock different abilities when they defeat ability users. With this, Yuuki takes his time to check out the conditions needed to unlock the 3 new skills. For some context, the 3 new skills to be unlocked are Sunglasses, Black Shadow, and Fake News, all of which require that Yuuki either receive ability attacks from 12 deities or defeat consecutive opponents with combat status above certain levels. Upon thinking about these weird conditions, Yuuki does his best to try and figure out what a blade-based ability attack is, or even where to find the 12 deities the system wants him to defeat. Thankfully, before he loses his goddamn mind, Yuuki suddenly remembers the idiot who just kidnapped his sister, saying something about 12 deities and Olympus front earlier, and decides to ask him for some pointers. Soon after waking the knocked out fool up, Yuuki tells the guy to explain what he meant by Olympus front earlier, and the bastard, after stuttering, tells him that the 12 deities of Olympus are fighting in the Olympus front battle. Curious, Yuuki asks the guy if he's one of the 12 deities, but the guy tells him that even though he's different from the other ability users, Akira Kume, on the other hand, is a second deity already. With all that said, the dimwit continues, saying all sorts of incomprehensible things, so Yuuki drops the guy in the middle of the street, walks over to his sister, who's still unconscious, and carries her home. As he carries his unconscious sister back home, Yuuki thinks about his new ability, Borrowing Skill, and promises himself that he'll use this ability to save his family no matter what. Later that evening, when he returns home, Yuuki places his sister on her bed and sits beside her till she wakes up. About an hour later, Yui finally wakes up to see her big brother staring at something invisible to her in front of him, and calls him softly. The moment Yuuki notices that she's awake, he asks to make sure she's okay, and Yui promises that she's doing fine. Soon after, she notices their dad's ring being worn as a necklace on Yuuki's neck, and asks him about it. Well, Yuuki says he made their dad's ring into a necklace because it is his precious keepsake, and is prepared to treasure it for the rest of his life. Right after saying this, Yuuki recalls the moment he found his dad crying for the first time in his life, back when the poor man was praying to his deceased wife, and promising to protect their kids no matter what. While Yuuki stayed quiet, eavesdropping on his dad's private moment, albeit shocked to see his dad shed tears for the first time, the detective took out the ring and swore on his life that he would keep his kids safe. In the days that followed, that fateful day, Yuuki's dad returned to his normal, happy-go-lucky self, making sure to check up on his kids so they're okay mentally and physically. Unfortunately for the Jinbo family, their dad's smile and family's happiness were taken away because of the bastards like Akira, who wanted him gone. Fast forward to the night, Yuuki found his dad's body dangling from the ceiling noose. It's revealed that Yuuki found his dad's bloodied ring on the floor beneath his dad's body, and picked it up, all while swearing to avenge his father's unlawful death. Upon recalling those ghastly memories, Yuuki tells his sister, as he stares at the ring necklace, that their dad did nothing but protect both of them when he was still alive. Although Yui knows that's true, she still tells Yuuki that none of that matters now since their dad's not here anymore. Realizing she's right, Yuuki grabs the ring necklace and, while storming out of the room, reminds himself that it's now his turn to protect their dad and Yui's dignity, no matter what ability users appear from then on. Firstly, he's going to get revenge against the bastard, Akira, using his new ability borrowing skill, and ensure that the guy dies a long and sufferable death in his hands. With all that said, Yuuki leaves his sister in the nurse's office to rest and returns to class. A few minutes before Yuuki gets to his class, Akira, who's seen complaining over the goon he sent to kidnap Yuuki's sister, sits in Yuuki's seat and fumes in rage, as he wonders what's taking the guy so long. Just then, Jinta, the busybody, approaches and reminds Akira that he's occupying Yuuki's seat. Unfazed, Akira gets up from Yuuki's seat and tells Jinta that he's purposely sitting on his seat, all because he wants to kill Yuuki and win the Olympus front altogether. Around that same time, Yuuki, who strides vengefully to his classroom, thinks about the Olympus front thing he heard from the ability user earlier, and decides not to care too much about it. For now, though, all that matters to him is avenging his dad's death and protecting his dignity, and he's ready to sacrifice anything just to make Akira fold. Soon enough, Yuuki arrives at his classroom and snaps when he spots Akira holding Jinta's bloodied head up against the wall. By the time Akira spots him at the entrance door and welcomes him to his buddy's horror show, Yuuki calls out his friend's name, hoping to get a response from the half-dead dude. Thankfully, Jinta's still alive, but for now, he's very weak and unable to move. Seeing as his playthings finally arrived, Akira drops Jinta, turns to Yuuki, and asks him if he's pissed because his weakling buddy got beaten up, or his perverted dad died. After cursing Akira's existence under his breath, Yuuki finally replies to his insane question by telling him that he's only pissed because of the crimes he framed his dad for, nothing else. At this point, Akira, who's already activated his skill, Merciless Power, causing his body to ooze out some deadly purple attack aura, pretends not to know what Yuuki is talking about and instead asks him to explain. Without hesitation, Yuuki tells Akira that he already knows that he was the one who framed and killed his dad, who was nothing but a detective who protected the town and his family. Rather than admit to his crimes, Akira tells Yuuki not to label him a murderer when it was his father who chose to buy prostitutes and kill himself. Besides, even if Yuuki's right about him fabricating those lies against his father, many of which drove him to his death, Akira inches dangerously close to Yuuki and asks him if he can do anything about it. With nothing more to say, Yuuki grabs Akira's hand, all while promising to make him bow down and apologize, and activates his hunt skill, ability, borrowing. Thereafter, he takes a swing at Akira, thinking he'd already won against him, only to get the shock of his life when Akira not only dodges his attack, but lands a devastating punch on him as well. As the punches keep coming, Yuuki, who can't believe that his ability borrowing skill didn't work, tries to figure out what the hell must have happened to cause such an error. Not too long after, an error message pops up in front of Yuuki to inform him that his ability borrowing skill can't hunt the skill of a member of the 12 deities. At this point, it was already too late for poor Yuuki to do anything, simply because Akira wasn't letting down on the punches at all, while delivering beating after beating to the cocky Yuuki, even slamming his head against the wall and desks at times. Akira warns him to never rely only on bravado alone. The next time he fights a strong opponent like him, is all because Yuuki has and always will be his toy. Eventually, when the angry hunk of muscle gets satisfied with beating the fuck out of poor Yuuki, he leaves him be, and suddenly spots Yuuki's dad's ring on the floor beside a half-conscious Yuuki. Though curious at first, Akira quickly remembers the ring to be a relic that belonged to Yuuki's perverted dad. So, to make Yuuki's life even more pathetic, Akira raises his right foot to stomp on and break the ring. To his dismay, however, Yuuki, who refuses to let the disrespectful bastard defile his dad's ring in memory, covers the ring with his right palm and lets Akira step on his hand instead. When Akira starts laughing at his pathetic situation, Yuuki tells him not to laugh because he knows that his deceased father always protects his family and the town as a whole. By this time, Yuuki continues yapping to buy himself more time to rest. Along the line, a system message suddenly pops up to remind him about the conditions to unlock the new skill, fake news, or falsified documents, which involves him receiving an ability attack from any one of the 12 deities. Upon reading the ability's description yet again, Yuuki knows he can beat Akira if he somehow acquires that ability right then and there. So, as soon as he's fully rested, Yuuki gets back on his feet, muttering some words to encourage himself, and tells Akira to come at him. Without any hesitation, Akira activates his skill, Merciless Strong Arm, which is an ability attack, and increases his damage output by 20%. Thereafter, he punches Yuuki in the stomach and sends the poor schmuck crashing into the cluster of desks behind him. As Akira continues trash-talking him, Yuuki suddenly notices that he's already achieved the conditions to unlock the skill, falsified documents. Before activating the skill, Yuuki makes sure to read the effects, and soon realizes that this skill can falsify enemy abilities for a short period. While the poor guy rejoices in his success, the activation conditions appear on screen. But Yuuki, who's now overwhelmed by hope, ignores the activation conditions and instead gets himself ready to beat the shit out of Akira. Moments before round 2 begins, every student from the nearby classes hears about the fight between Yuuki, the perverted detective's son, and the infamous Akira that's about to happen. So they all rush towards Yuki's class and hang around every opening just to see for themselves who gets his arse whooped. With them, surrounded by spectators, Yuuki, still ignoring the falsified documents, skill activation conditions, reminds himself that the real battle of protecting his family's dignity begins at that point, so he can't afford to mess things up. Eventually, while Akira continues trash-talking him as usual, Yuuki finally reads the conditions needed to activate the falsified documents skill, and realizes how cooked he is when he finds out that he has to sacrifice a part of his body after touching his opponent. As he just stares at the message pop-up box, confused as to whether the system is demanding that he sacrifice a physical part of his body, Yuuki knows he can't afford to take another one of Akira's punches again, or else, it'll be over for him in an instant. So what does he do? Well, for starters, Yuuki sprints out of class, almost as if he were running away in fear, scans the abilities of a random guy in the crowd around them, and steals the guy's S-rank agility insight to escape temporarily. Right after stealing the ability, Yuuki returns to the ring and challenges Akira to come at him. By this time, Akira, who's had enough of Yuuki's tricks, trash-talks him a little bit, and then takes a few swings at Yuuki. To his surprise, the once stiff Yuuki skillfully dodges all his consecutive attacks like a martial arts professional, and this really pisses Akira the hell off. Even so, the deadly dude refuses to give up, as he continues trying to kick and punch Yuuki, whom he calls an ace of some club, as hard as he possibly can. At one point in their fight, Yuuki dodges one of his kicks with a super high jump, and Akira, shocked to see such agility from a wuss, pauses his attacks to figure out the perverted son's next move. Before he can blink, however, Yuuki, upon landing from his high jump, touches Akira's arm, hence completing the first condition to activate falsified documents, and instantly gets a red alert notification telling him that he needs to sacrifice his right eye to completely activate the skill. With nothing more to lose, Yuuki happily sacrifices his right eye, activating the falsified documents skill, and successfully alters Akira's merciless power skill by changing all his ability values to the barest minimum. Around this same time, Akira, who's none the wiser, tries punching Yuuki in the face, all while trash-talking him, but this time around, he finds out in the weirdest way possible that his punches can't affect Yuuki anymore. As his new reality dawns on him, Yuuki, whose right eye was already red and gone, tells Akira that his fists won't work on him anymore. Confused, Akira pulls up his abilities value screen, and gets the shock of his life when he sees every single stat at a triple F rank, meaning he's even now weaker than Jinta. To help the negative IQ dumbass understand his situation, Yuuki tells him that he falsified his abilities to make him much weaker than he is, but even so, Akira still didn't understand what Yuuki was on about. By the time Akira notices Yuuki's red right eye and wonders what could have happened to it, Yuuki lands the first punch on the guy's cheek and sends him crashing into some desks behind him. As Yuuki's second punch comes in, Akira finally realizes the price Yuuki paid just to falsify his ability, and fears what's coming next for him, especially now that he's wide open and vulnerable. Thankfully, Yuuki, our proud MC, doesn't disappoint us one bit, as bro literally destroys Akira's rugged face with punches and kicks from every angle and body part he has left on him. When Akira goes half unconscious, Yuuki picks the useless bastard up, takes his time to remember just how pitiful his dad's life was because of the useless scum in his hands, and then, in one fell swoop, uses every last bit of rage inside him to slam Akira's head into the floor, fracturing his skull in the process. By this time, Akira knows he's lost already, so, with whatever consciousness he has left in him, he admits that he was wrong and tries to ask for Yuuki's forgiveness, as if that can bring back his dad. Luckily for us, our MC isn't a pushover, so, as soon as he realizes Akira still had some life left in him to speak, he pulls the bastard, his hair, slams him one more time into the ground, fracturing the guy's nose, and then lets Akira know that there's no way in hell he'll forgive him for causing his dad's death because no matter how much Akira apologizes, his dad can't come back from the dead. With that said, Yuuki gives Akira a chance to spare his life by admitting that he was the one who falsely accused his dad of SA and ruined his reputation. For a moment, Akira refuses to budge, as he hangs on to whatever sick pride he has left in him. However, once Yuuki senses this, he slams Akira's head into the ground one more time and listens to him say the magic words before he makes the gangster join his dad in the afterlife. To stay alive, Akira finally folds and admits right in front of everyone in the class that he was the asshole who fabricated the SA crimes against the detectives. Having heard Akira finally admit to committing the grave crime, Yuuki calls to his dad's spirit and apologizes for clearing his name a bit too late for both of them. Not too long after forcing Akira to admit to his crimes, the falsified document's skill effect ends, and Yuuki returns to normal. Soon after, he gets a notification from the system telling him that the 12th deity, Ares' host, has been rendered unable to fight. Confused, Yuuki, with his bloody right eye, tries to figure out how Akira got to become a representative for Ares, which is one of the 12 deities, in the first place. Just then, another message box pops up to inform Yuuki that he's acquired another skill, the secret ninja bag, for his first victory in the Olympus front, and Yuuki rhetorically asks what the Olympus front really means. Seconds later, a voice from another realm appears in his head and explains that the Olympus front is a battle amongst the deities to decide the new creator of the world. As Yuuki's subconscious self stares at the masked man with horns, the man calls him the chosen one of Taoshin and assures him that, if they work together, then they can obtain everything their heart desires. With that said, the man wearing a mask in Yuuki's subconscious removes his mask and introduces himself as Bandit, a demigod born from a human and a deity. To ensure Yuuki understands the world of the deities, Bandit narrates his origin story, starting from the very random morning when he was just about to leave his human mother's house to go on his daily commute. On that very morning, Bandit's mother, being the only human living amongst the deities, called him back before he got far to give him something he'd forgotten back at home. Bandit, while grabbing the stuff, told his mother to address him using respectful language, but his mother refused to do such a thing because she felt he was a half-baked brat who does nothing but oversleep every single day. As she smiled brightly toward her son, Bandit's mother advised him to become a disciplined person so he could become a proper deity one day. By that time, Taoshin Bandit, who's super embarrassed, just quits talking to his mother and instead heads out of the house. Minutes after getting out of the house, Bandit hears an angel screaming nearby, so he rushes toward the source to investigate what the matter is. Getting there, he spots Ares, the most arrogant lord among them, harassing a female angel, claiming to have ultimate command as a lord, and ripping her clothes, almost as if he was about to SA her. When the angel resists his advances, he throws her against the pavement and gets ready to force himself on her. Thankfully, before that happens, Bandit comes out of his hiding spot and intervenes. Ares, who recognizes him instantly, asks Bandit, whom he calls a mere human, to explain who he's ordering around, and Bandit unapologetically tells Ares that he's the one he's talking to. By this time, Ares drops the girl, inches closer to Bandit, and asks if he is okay to defy a lord. When Bandit tries to remind Braindead Lord that he also becomes a half-lord, Ares lets him know that he's only a mixed breed that shouldn't get too full of himself. Ignoring the insults, Bandit reminds Ares that anyone who despises the angels, the messengers of the lords, is lower than lord. To avoid pointless argument with lesser lord, Ares loses interest altogether, ignores Bandit, and leaves shortly after telling Bandit, with a smug look on his face, that more interesting things await them. Several days later, Bandit returned home on a random evening and found his mother half alive, lying in a pool of her blood. Confused, he rushes toward his mother and asks her to tell him who did this to her. Sadly, Bandit's mother only apologized for being human, and told him just how much ridiculed he is about to face as a half-lord, and died seconds after assuring him the human blood in him would make him a kinder lord to people than the other assholes who claim to be lords. Overwhelmed with grief, sorrow, and revenge, Bandit called loudly for his mother, but unfortunately, nobody answered him. A few days later, just as the other lords were about to begin the holy war discussion, Ares walks as he holds Bandit head and telling the other lords that he found the half-lord that eavesdropping, while Bandit struggles to free himself from Ares' grasp. Some of the other lords called him a mixed breed and then warned him not to show up, and announced that meeting meant only for lords. The moment Bandit tries claiming to be a lord just like them, Ares snaps and bashes his head against the wall. Ares reminds Bandit that the mix of human and a lodier lord doesn't automatically make him a lord like them. Soon after saying that, Ares tells them humans are good as toys for lords, citing that they make nice sounds when they're being toyed with, and almost instantly, Bandit asks him if he's the one who killed his mother. After doubling down on his stupid thinking that humans are nothing but playthings for lords, Ares assures him that he doesn't kill his toys. By this time, Bandit, lords shouldn't be allowed to mock humans, gets back on his feet and takes a swing at Ares. To nobody's surprise, Ares dodges Bandit's attacks, appears behind him, and, soon after, reminds him that no human can beat a lord, punches Bandit consecutively till he's down. Eventually, one of other lords tells Ares to stop punching Bandit because the sacred battle is about to begin. When Ares advises that they deal with Bandit first, one of Fire Lords there suggests to give the half-lord a chance to prove his worth as a real deity by letting him participate in the Olympus front, and Ares instantly loves the idea. Thereafter, the all-seeing eye explains the nature of the Olympus front to every lord around, and Ares, upon listening to the all-seeing eye talk, promises to kill Bandit as a real deity in the Olympus front. With the stage set, the all-seeing eye begins the sacred and cruel battle to decide the creator of the heavens. Having heard the all-seeing eye kickstart the battle, Bandit decides to win the Olympus front so he can become the creator and avenge his mother no matter how painful the battle is. Soon after saying all that, Bro states his memorandum, but the other lords make fun of him and confront him to try to win the Olympus front if he can. Determined to find a suitable participant for the Olympus front, Bandit spent the next few days scanning the earth for someone he could trust. Eventually, one day, he found and chose Yuki to be his representative of the Olympus front after seeing the predicament he was in. The very moment Yuki received his first ever ability, which is talent theft, Tushin Bandit named Yuki as his host in the Olympus front and groomed him to become his fighter against the deities. With all that said, Bandit ends his origin story, but Yuki, who's now at home and has been listening the entire time, asks Bandit, who appears before him as a masked apparition, why he's changed his appearance. In response, Bandit says it's because it's easier for him to maintain that form in the mortal world, and Yuki agrees. Right before they continue chatting, Yui calls Yuki down to have his dinner, and asks to make sure Yuki's okay to return to school. Since he's finally defeated his arch-nemesis, Akira, Yuki smiles and assures his sister that he's doing okay, since he can still see through his left eye. Apparently, after blowing Akira away, Yuki made the bastard apologize and admit to fabricating the SA crimes against Detective Combo, Yuki's father. On camera, not too long after, Akira was arrested and charged with defamation through fabrication. Now that his dad's name is finally cleared, Yuki returns to school in just a few days and continues his life. One day at school, Yuki makes fun of his sister for being such a worrywart when he had only lost one eye. Bandit, who's floating right beside him, calls him the abnormal one for staying too calm after losing a body part. In his defense, Yuki says he's perfectly okay with it, as long as he was able to avenge his dad. As Bro holds and stares at his father's ring, Jinta rushes into the classroom, screaming out Yuki's name, and then stops to ask if he's feeling fine, especially after his right eye injury. Yuki, who now covers his disabled right eye with an eye patch, tells him he's doing okay. But Jinta refuses to believe him, all because he's worried Yuki can only see out of one eye now. When Yuki tells his worrisome buddy, with a smile on his face, to calm down, Jinta breaks down and places his head on Yuki's desk. Touched by Jinta's concern for his well-being, Yuki thanks Jinta and continues smiling. Before long, Bandit warns Yuki not to get too comfortable because the Olympus front isn't over yet. But then again, Yuki tells him that the Battle of the 12 Lords has nothing to do with him, now that he achieved his revenge. At that moment, Jinta, who just heard Yuki talks about the 12 Lords, suddenly has his inner nerd excited as he frolics around the place and tells Yuki, who asks if he likes the 12 Lords, about some of the lords he knows. Poseidon, the Sea Lord, Hephaestus, the Fire Lord, Demeter, the Fertility Lord, and finally, Zeus, the ruler of all the lords. Jinta storms out of the classroom to find a book that can give you more information about lords. Shortly after watching him leave, Bandit smacks the nonchalant Yuki in the head and tells him not to let his guard down, because the Olympus front is a battle to the death. Soon after that, he told him about the special ability. Each lord's host have to fight with their lives on the line, and also warns him that these guys don't hesitate to use brutal methods to win their battles. Hearing this, Yuki tells Bandit that if he has to use falsified documents against these guys, then he might sacrifice his entire body. But just then, Bandit, having realized how risky such an ability is, it warns him never to use it again. When Yuki asks why, Bandit smacks him again and then lets him know that losing an eye in combat is a big disadvantage because it becomes a fatal weakness. At this point, Yuki asks Bandit how he's supposed to win against these bozos when the skill that he got from defeating Akira, the secret ninja bag, which is an invisible, infinite producing bag, and is basically useless and can't hold any weapons. In response, Bandit urges him to just forget about defeating the Lord lords with such things. And while Yuuki agrees with his suggestion, he does wonder, while checking his ability chart, if there are any other useful abilities he can use. Just then, he spots one other skill, malicious voyeurism, as well as the conditions needed to unlock it, and then figures that if he can read the opponent's mind, then he just might have a chance against the other fighters. Before spending too much time thinking of strategies, Yuuki quickly reminds himself that the Olympus front has nothing to do with him anymore since he's achieved his revenge, and then spends the rest of the school day in peace. Later that evening, when he returns home, Yuuki finds his sister outside their house, cleaning all the graffiti and horrible messages the bastards drew on their home way before their dad's name was cleared, and scolds her a little for doing such strenuous work while still recovering. After assuring her big brother that she's doing perfectly fine, Yui tells him that she felt the need to do this as quickly as possible since it's now been proven that dad's crime was a lie. Realizing just how bothered she is by their dad's name being cleared, Yuuki picks up a damp napkin and joins her to clean off some of the graffiti on the walls as well. Moments later, Yui walks down the street to buy some more detergent, and Yuuki urges her to be careful on her way. Upon seeing her off, Yuuki heaves a sigh of relief and tears up as he can finally start seeing things return to normal for both of them. Unfortunately for him, Yui never returned home alive, because in about an hour, Yuuki was called to the morgue to identify her body. Soon after identifying his sister's lifeless body on a stretcher in the morgue, Yuuki finally realizes that his battle isn't over yet. In a fit of rage, the poor guy lets off a terrifying scream that shakes the core of the building itself, as he begins yet another journey of vengeance against his sister's unidentified killers. Over the next few days, after Yui's death, poor Yuuki gets haunted by nightmares of his sister's voice, calling and smiling at him from the afterlife. One morning, after seeing his sister in his dream, begging for his help as she gets engulfed by some eternal flame, Yuuki jerks back awake and calls her name as loudly as he can, almost as if he were expecting her response. Eventually, when he remembers that Yui's already gone, Yuuki realizes that he's now truly alone in this world. So he just sits there in his bed and sobs quietly for a few more hours. Soon after, he dresses up, putting on a cloak to mask his disguise, and heads toward the police station in the heavy rain to see the lead detective on his sister's case for any updates on the investigation. For the past 10 days, since his sister's death, Yuuki has been visiting the police station every day to discuss and follow up on the case with Detective Hasegawa. This time around, Hasegawa finds Yuuki standing in the rain in front of the police station, so he stops him right there before letting him enter the station, and asks him if he's there to hear any more details about the case. When Yuuki asks if he's found his sister's killers, Hasegawa firstly apologizes for having him come to the station every day, and then tells him that he can't discuss the details of an ongoing case with a civilian like him. Disappointed, Yuuki turns his back and leaves the station without uttering another word. Although he can't get any information from the detective currently, Yuuki refuses to give up just yet till he finds the culprit who killed his sister and wiped them off the face of the earth. Not too long after leaving the station, Yuuki asks Bandit if his sister was killed by one of the 12 lords. And while Bandit can't say for sure, he does let Yuuki know that the possibility of that being the case is pretty high. Just to make sure Yuuki's ready for any battle, Bandit asks him if he'll be ready to fight the opponent once he spots them, and Yuuki, consumed by rage, assures Bandit that he's ready to fight the culprit, regardless of whoever they are. For now, though, Yuuki knows that getting information is the priority to figure out who the culprit is. While he searches for a way to get information, a random group of 5 thugs is seen in a random dilapidated building, yapping about an incriminating video they just posted online, as well as how they'll split the profits. Seizing this opportunity, Yuuki suddenly calls them and asks if their combat power is currently at rank D. Confused, the gang of Nimrods demand that Yuuki identify himself, but Yuuki ignores them for a second and does a head count on all of them. Once he realizes that there are 5 thugs, all with combat rank D, he gets the idea to use these bozos to complete the conditions needed to unlock the malicious voyeurism skill. Around that same time, the thugs, also underestimating Yuuki as just some random pushover, decide to beat him up and take his money for their video funds, so they can become street heroes. Upon checking out the conditions needed to unlock the malicious voyeurism skill, which involves him defeating 5 consecutive opponents with combat power D and above, Yuuki smirks and mutters some quiet things to himself. As the thugs get even more pissed at Yuuki for ignoring them and yapping about some random thing, Yuuki silently praises himself for stealing Hasegawa's combat power back at the police station, and pushes himself even further to find his sister's killer. By this time, one of the thugs takes a swing at Yuuki to end him, but Yuuki easily dodges the swing and knocks the guy out with just a single punch. Having seen Yuuki easily knock down one of theirs, the other thugs all charge towards him to attack at once, like the cowards that they are. To their dismay, however, Yuuki moves swiftly amongst them, recognizing just how troublesome handling these many people is, and begins knocking them all down with single punches, one by one. Soon after watching Yuki take down 2 of them, one of the thugs gets a huge wooden box and tries to smash it on Yuki's head. As expected, Yuki dodges the attack, drifts much closer to him, and kicks the life out of him. Thereafter, he turns to the 4th person, who happens to be the first person he kicked earlier, and kicks him one more time in the chin. Now, instead of the last thug running away, the fool still tries to attack him. This time around, Yuki shows him no mercy as he grabs the fool by his chin and smashes his head into the ground. With all 5 thugs defeated, Yuki clears the acquisition condition required to unlock the malicious voyeurism and unlocks the skill. Shortly after the brawl, Bandit appears before Yuki and advises him not to get too indiscriminate with his methods. After assuring Bandit that he's fine with his methods, Yuki, while acquiring the skill, malicious voyeurism, tells him just how necessary it is for him to do these things to find the culprit, especially now that he's acquired this important new skill, and returns to the police station to see Hasegawa one more time. Getting there, Yuki finds Hasegawa thinking about how unpleasant Yui's case has gotten for him, judging by the way she was killed, and approaches him to ask him a few more questions. As soon as Hasegawa spots him wearing his cloak in the rain, he tells Yuki that he still can't share any real details about the case, no matter how many times he shows up. Even so, Yuki takes note of the malicious voyeurism skill activation condition, which is to ask a question to someone within a 1-meter radius of his location, and then asks Hasegawa if he can at least tell him the cause of his sister's death. The moment Hasegawa starts giving reasons why he can't break the rules to tell Yuki such intricate information, Yuki successfully activates the silent mind reading skill and finds out, by reading Hasegawa's mind, that his sister was pierced through the abdomen with a sharp blade. As Yuki slowly gets the hang of using this mind reading skill, he takes note of the information he just got out of reading the detective's mind, and then moves forward to ask if Hasegawa can tell him where Yui was killed. Again, while Hasegawa keeps bringing up rules prohibiting him from revealing such information, Yuki, on the other hand, activates the mind-reading skill, and finds out, by reading Hasegawa's thoughts, that Yui was found collapsed in a vacant lot on the 3rd Street. With this new information, Yuki leaves the police station for the lot at 3rd Street to search for clues. When he gets there, he asks a police guard standing nearby, while activating the mind-reading skill, if he can tell him what kind of incident happened in the vacant lot near them. Once the tired police guard starts talking about the rules, preventing him from sharing the details, Yuki reads his mind, and soon finds out that the strange incident, which involved the murder of a high school girl, leaves their detectives clueless. Right after confirming everything from the guard, Yuki leaves the man there and roams around the vicinity, thinking about how such a brutal incident can happen with no clues or leads pointing to the culprit. To build a strong case in his head, Yuki starts piecing together all the fragments of information he's gathered so far. Since the brutal murder leaves even the most experienced detectives confused, Yuki figures the culprit surely isn't an ordinary human. Just then, a random ability user swung his spear at Yuki's face while bro was busy spacing out and thinking. Thankfully, before that user cuts Yuki's head off, Bandit alerts him, and he dodges the strike in time. Upon failing to take Yuki out on his first try, the attacker, who happens to be the host of another lord, just like Yuki is to Bandit, commends him for dodging the attack pretty well, and then talks about the things he's heard about Yuki's combat ability. For a moment, Yuki gets confused as to who this random dude is, but when he spots the guy's spear and remembers the cause of his sister's death, as well as the confusing clues left behind, Yuki instantly realizes that his sister's killer must be an ability user, just like the dimwit standing in front of him. As he swells from his internal rage, Yuki asks the guy if he's his sister's killer, but the proud bozo gives him an ambiguous reply to piss him off much further. Before long, the green aura guy activates his flash pulse skill, Star Radiance Spear Flash, and challenges Yuki to defeat him if he wants to know the truth about his sister's death. Yuki knows that he needs to avoid taking any damage from the guy's spear if he wants to win the fight. So, when the guy attacks him, Yuki dodges the strike and tries to steal the bastard's ability by touching him. Unfortunately for him, the guy already knows how he activates his abilities, so he just gets out of Yuki's palm path and, while yapping about the reach of his spear, activates his skill again, after which he smashes him into a nearby wall. In the aftermath of his attack, the disappointed attacker asks his pop-up deity if he's sure that Yuki's also a host, like, seeing as bro has no resistance, and his deity tells him that while they're both hosts, Yuki's master is a demolord, so it's only expected that his abilities are half-baked, just like Bandit's. By this time, Yuki, who somehow survives that attack, gets back up and assures Bandit that he's doing okay. Before long, he finds out that he's accidentally activated the Shadow Dance Phantom user's skill just by receiving a blade attack from the attacker while using his abilities. Even so, Yuuki still didn't know how to use such a skill in this kind of situation. As his attacker prepares for round 2 of their battle, Yuuki gets desperate to bring him down, so he nonchalantly activates the Shadow Dance skill, which freaks the attacker and his lord out, transforms into a shadow, and then lunges at the attacker and his lord, hoping to do some level of damage to them. Soon after getting hit by Yuuki's Shadow Dance ability, the attacker heaves a sigh of relief as he realizes that the skill has no offensive power, and mocks Yuuki for getting cocky with his Dema Lord. Having seen how useless the Shadow Dance ability is, Yuuki snaps and wonders how he's supposed to fight with such a stupid ability. Just then, he asks Bandit if the lord on the attacker's shoulder is one of the 12 lords, and Bandit says the lord, who's called Alectryon, is just mentally weak and half-hearted lord who is unable to become a higher lord. Explaining further, Bandit tells his servant that deities often choose guardians with similar traits and weaknesses as themselves, so they can inherit them, and Yuuki, upon hearing this, decides he's going to figure out and exploit his attacker's weakness alongside his lord, so he can stand a chance against them. With the stage set, Yuuki activates his Shadow Dance skill, but before using it, he asks Bandit to tell him how freely he can move the shadows, and Bandit basically tells him, after a long yap, that the limits of the ability all depend on his mental strength, meaning, if Yuuki can put his mind into the making the ability last, then his options are endless. Hearing this, Yuuki creates a shadow wall behind his attacker, which confuses the bozo as he tries to figure out Yuuki's endgame, and baits the guy to come attack him. Upon noticing the expression on Yuuki's face, the attacker figures that he must have something sinister planned, so to prevent Yuuki from activating his plan, the attacker charges at him, aiming his spear at Yuuki's vital organs, and ultimately ends up stabbing him in the side of his stomach. Yuuki, knowing that he has no choice but to take the attack so he can activate his technique, moves a little sideways while taking the hit, so the wound doesn't affect any of his vital organs. By the time the attacker realized that Yuuki intentionally didn't move, all just to take the attack and avoid a fatal wound, it was already too late for him, because Yuuki had already caught the idiot in his trap. Before the guy can react to save himself, Yuuki touches the fool, invokes a spell he calls the Dark World Dark Period spell, and instantly teleports himself and the scared attacker into a dark realm. Shortly after arriving in Yuuki's dark realm, the attacker, who notices that his spear had been pulled out of Yuuki's stomach, looks around him and tries to figure out where Yuuki went. Not too long after, Yuuki's voice emanates from all corners of the dark realm, thick and clear, almost as if he were the lord of that realm, explains to the attacker that humans get 80% of their information through sight, and then lets the attacker know that he'll now have to fight with only 20% of the information he can make out in the thick darkness. Around this time, the attacker snaps and activates his flash pulse skill again to intimidate Yuuki, claiming that the attack has no blind spots. Amused by the coward's dramatic display, Yuuki assures his attacker that he's not going to attack him because he's only interested in getting revenge against his sister's killer, and then urges him to stay with him in their dark hell forever since he's the culprit. Refusing to spend the rest of his life in a dark prison, the attacker, who still thinks that the distance between his location in the realm and the road in the outside world is 5 meters, decides to just run out of the dark realm and save himself. Soon after running for what seems to be an hour, the attacker gets tired and stops to take a breather, and wonders why he isn't out of the dark realm yet. Just then, Alectryon pops up behind the attacker, who's later identified as Tetsuya, and urges him to hurry up and find a way out of here. As the host and deity argue back and forth, Yuuki speaks again, but this time, he lectures Tetsuya, his attacker and his lord, just how frail people's minds can be when they get trapped in dark spaces. While Yuuki continues lecturing them both, Tetsuya and Alectryon get increasingly uncomfortable, as they begin ordering Yuuki to show himself, so they can fight fair and square. Ultimately, Yuuki appears behind Tetsuya as he ends his lecture, steals his flash pulse skill after touching his left arm, and then punches Tetsuya hard in the stomach. Soon after receiving the punch, Tetsuya coughs up some blood, and then asks Yuuki to explain why he can see him. As the realm stays silent, Tetsuya realizes that his spear is gone, and begins to panic. Before he knows it, Yuuki activates the flash pulse skill he just stole from Tetsuya and stabs the bastard in the hand, using his own spear. As Tetsuya wails in pain, Yuuki tells him he's able to see him because he's manipulating his shadow. Following that, he asks Tetsuya to narrate how it feels to be killed by his spear. But before Tetsuya can answer him, Yuuki stabs him in the right leg. At this point, Alectryon starts spouting some bullshit, claiming that a mere demilord shouldn't be this strong, and then turns to his host, Tetsuya, before urging him to do something about Yuuki. By this time, Tetsuya ignores his lord and tries crawling his way out of the realm to avoid getting killed. Sadly, before he can make it 2 meters, Yuuki appears before holding his spear, reminding him just how painful Yui's death was for her, and then sinks the spear into Tetsuya's chest. Shortly afterward, he dispels the Dark World spell and returns them to the normal world. With Tetsuya wounded and unable to move, Yuki asks him, while activating the mind-reading skill, if he's the one who killed his sister. When Tetsuya claims to be the culprit, Yuuki finds out, by reading his mind, that someone called Hephaestus was the one who killed Yui and then made Tetsuya take the blame for the killing. As Yuuki stands there, pissed at the guy for deceiving him and wasting his time, something very weird happens to his malicious voyeurism skill. It levels up and unlocks a new ability to see memories of those whose mind he just read when he touches them. Though confused by this, Yuuki tries this new upgrade by touching Tetsuya, and, before long, he manages to catch a glimpse of Hephaestus's host, who happens to be a huge man. Sadly, once he marks the guy's face, Yuuki passes out and collapses from excessive bleeding. 1 day later, he wakes up on a hospital bed near the battle site after dreaming about the last time he was wounded, and his sister was there beside him to nurse him back to health. Dejected, Yuuki whispers his sister's name softly, while staring at the sky from the window. But then, suddenly, he feels a sharp pain in his lower abdomen, and touches the bandage wound around that spot. Right after, remembering how he got wounded, Yuuki looks around the room he's in, wondering how and who brought him to a hospital, and stays in bed. Seconds later, however, Hasegawa shows up at the door, relieved to see that Yuuki's regained consciousness, and tells him that he was suddenly brought to the hospital by an anonymous call, which surprised him. By this time, Yuuki remembers Tetsuya, Alectrion's host, and then asks Hasegawa if another person was brought in after him. Though confused by the question, Hasegawa assures Yuuki that he was the only one who was brought in. As Hasegawa continues yapping, Yuuki starts to wonder what happened to Tetsuya while he was unconscious. Did he escape? To find out what really happened, Yuuki activates his silent mind reading ability and asks Hasegawa to tell him how the current case is going. When Hasegawa starts spewing out his bullshit rules again, Yuuki reads his mind and finds out that the police now have new information. Thereafter, he touches Hasegawa's shoulder, pretending to remove some dust from it, and then uses the upgraded, silent mind reading technique on him to find out what new information was discovered. Soon enough, Yuuki sees a memory image of Hasegawa giving a press conference about a corpse they found at the crime scene. Although the murder weapon still hasn't been found, its components, which were identified on Tetsuya's fatal wound, were purchased in large quantities at the Omori Metal Factory on 4th Street. Seeing this, Yuuki gets a sharp pain in the head, which alerts Hasegawa a little, but then he brushes it off as he is spacing out. Soon enough, Hasegawa urges Yuuki to rest and leave things to the police, so he can rest and heal up, and then leaves. Shortly after watching the detective leave, Yuuki dresses up and sneaks out of the hospital to get to 4th Street, so he can search for clues to the culprit. Getting there, Bandit warns him not to do something reckless like engaging any ability user in a fight because of the condition he's in. But Yuuki, recalling the moment he saw his sister's dead body in the morgue, tells his master that his pain doesn't compare to the pain she must have felt while dying. Before long, Yuuki and his master hear a strange clanking sound nearby, so they stop to investigate if it's being caused by an ability user. While they search around, Bandit warns Yuuki to be careful because he senses this ability user might be stronger than Tetsuya. Soon after walking around, Yuuki and Bandit find the huge man Yuuki saw in Tetsuya's memories, carving a statue out of iron while backing them. Once the man notices Yuuki, he faces Yuuki, praises him for defeating Tetsuya, and then asks if he's also a host. The moment Yuuki recognizes the guy's face, he charges at the big man, ignoring Bandit's warning to be careful, but then stops dead in his tracks. When he realizes that the statue the bastard was carving out earlier resembled his sister in intense pain. Without even thinking, Yuuki gets caught in the huge guy's bait, ignores Bandit's warning to calm down, and attacks him without a proper assessment of his abilities. To protect himself, the huge guy clenches his iron hammer, activates the steel flame smithing skill, and slams the hammer on the ground to create a wall of fire, all while insulting Yuki's resolve. When Yuuki refuses to back off, the huge guy, who's Hephaestus's host, slams his hammer into Yuuki's stomach wound and leaves the brain-dead MC in a world of pain. Thereafter, he condemns Yuuki for underestimating him by coming to the fight wounded, and tells him to come back and fight him when he's in perfect condition. If he manages to stay alive, With all that said, the huge guy disappears and leaves Yuuki with a new set of wounds and severe burns all over his body. As Yuuki slowly loses consciousness again, he apologizes to his sister's spirit for not being able to win this time around. Luckily for him, before he dies completely, a random girl arrives near his weak body and casts a healing spell. She calls Earth's compassion on him. Several hours later, Yuuki jerks back awake and finds himself on a normal bed in a girl's room. Upon regaining his senses, Yuuki touches his lower abdomen and soon finds out that his former wound is already healed completely. Not too long after, the random girl shows up, happy to finally see him up, and greets him. Just as Yuuki tries to figure out who the random girl is, the girl's lord appears before her and scolded her for not looking after Yuki's condition properly. When the girl tells her lord that is because the treatment isn't completely finished, their argument gets even worse. By this time, Bandit recognizes the lord that having around the random girl to be Demeter, and then explains to Yuuki that she is the lord that governs fertility among the 12 lords. Upon hearing this, Yuuki's mind instantly flashes back to the hostility he's faced from the lords so far, and he figures Demeter and her host must be his enemies. Thankfully, before he does anything drastic, the random girl, whom Demeter calls Rika, uses the Earth Compassion healing spell on him to further heal his wounds, and Yuuki, noticing how warm the spell feels on his body, soon realizes that Rika's making him even better. As Yuuki struggles to wrap his head around what's happening, Bandit, who's noticed the unease on his face, assure him that he can trust Demeter because she is the only lord in the world who's kind to humans. Once she's done scolding her host, Demeter then turns to Yuuki and promises to explain things shortly after healing his wounds completely. For now, though, she asks him if he'll trust her host, Rika, and Yuuki, shocked and happy to see his body returning to normal, thanks her for all the help rendered so far. Soon after watching her host fail to completely heal Yuuki up this time, Demeter gets disappointed at Rika and scolds her again for being a useless POS. Refusing to back down from the insult, Rika lets her master know that she's also doing her best to nurse Yuuki back to health. But even so, Demeter doesn't apologize for being loud. Eventually, when the arguments stop, Yuuki asks Demeter and Rika why they helped him, and Rika tells him it's because helping people is natural and that they don't abandon people. Well, Yuuki and Bandit know that the answer they just gave him is bullshit, but while Yuuki keeps his cool, Bandit, however, reminds Demeter about the Olympus front, where they can only be one winner, and then urges her to tell them the real reason why they helped Yuuki. With nothing more to hide, Demeter sighs heavily and tells Bandit that she saved Yuuki because they're at an overwhelming disadvantage in the battle. With all that said, Rika inches closer to Yuuki and begs him to fight together with them. Confused, Yuuki asks her why they want him to fight alongside them, but to explain the real reason to him, Rika and her deity take Yuuki out to a field by the canal minutes later, and use their Earth's Compassion healing spell to regrow some of the flowers on that spot. Shortly after, showing Yuuki just how amazing the Earth Compassion spell is, Rika sighs, and Demeter tells Yuuki that their ability, which has no means of attack, maximizes life force. Seeing as they practically have no other means against their enemies in the battle, Rika asks Yuuki one more time if he'll fight together with them. Before Yuuki gives his answer, Bandit appears and urges him to accept the offer, not only because they have no means to attack, but also because Demeter loves humans. When Yuuki remains hesitant, Bandit tells him to look at their true feelings using his silent mind reading skill, malicious voyeurism, and see things for himself. After reading Rika's mind, Yuuki finally realizes that Rika and her host are being sincere with their request. In addition to everything she's said, Rika reminds Yuuki that he's going to need her constant recovery ability if he's going to defeat Hephaestus's flame ability. By this time, Yuuki realizes just how lonely he's been lately, especially after his dad and Yui died. For the first time since his dad's death, someone else, aside from Yui, treated his wounds and got really concerned for his well-being. So, to reward them for looking after him at his lowest, Yuuki extends his hand for a handshake and urges Demeter and her host to take care of him. At this time, Rika shakes his hand vigorously, encourages him to do the same for them as well, and officially forms their alliance right then and there. Shortly afterward, Yuuki gets right back to figuring out how to defeat the blacksmith. To do this, however, he knows he needs to get a new ability that can counter Hephaestus's ability to manipulate flames. If not, then even getting close to his host's wall of fire will be much harder for him to do. With that said, he thinks about Hephaestus's appearance earlier, realizes that he must be stronger than any of the lords he saw so far, and then thinks about finding out Hephaestus's weakness, that's if he has any. Soon enough, Bandit calls Yuuki and reminds him that the ability acquisition conditions for the skill they've been waiting for have finally presented themselves. Seeing this, Yuuki grins happily, because he knows that the ability he's about to unlock can give him the upper hand in his next battle against Hephaestus. So, while he works on unlocking the secret ninja bag ability, which is the ability he's been waiting for, Hephaestus's host, whom we'll call Blacksmith for now, is seen back at the 4th Street warehouse, calling one of his clients, who seems to be one of the 12 lords, and asking for a review on the new weapon he just made for them. Even when the blacksmith assured the unknown client that their weapon had the best sharpness, the client still didn't appreciate his work, and this made the blacksmith pretty pissed, as he confronted the heavenly being, calling them out for being an ingrate. Somewhere along the line, Hephaestus's little head pops up beside Blacksmith and lets him know that there is no way his lord will express gratitude for job done. That's just how they are. Pissed, Blacksmith slams his iron hammer on the warehouse floor, accepts his loss for now, and decides to cut back a bit since it's all just mundane business. Around the time Blacksmith hangs up the call, Yuuki, Rika, and their respective lords arrive at the warehouse to engage Blacksmith and Hephaestus in another battle. Once he spots them, Blacksmith starts yapping out snide remarks at Yuuki for being alive. But then Yuuki, refusing to lose to a verbal battle, fires back with his own remarks. Amid all the yapping, Rika asks Demeter who the scary-looking dude is, and Demeter tells her host about Hephaestus. As soon as Blacksmith's done yapping with Yuuki, he turns to Demeter, welcomes her to her final battle, and then summons a fire wall, so large that it exposes all the terrifying statues he's made of his victims behind him. Upon seeing the plethora of gut-wrenching statues behind the blacksmith, Yuuki and Rika, alongside their lords, gasp in disgust, as they all wonder if these statues are those of his former victims. Well, to answer their questions, Blacksmith tells them that the weapons he makes preserve the lives they've taken as they are and turn them into his sad and disgusting artwork over time. Following this, Blacksmith turns to Demeter again, but this time, he confronts her to be a lord of fertility and love, and then involving herself in conflict. As Demeter remains quiet, ignoring his remarks, Blacksmith moves on to warn her that the battle they're about to fight is one with honorable sacrifice. Just then, Yuki stops him right there, and underrates the Olympus front, which rubs Blacksmith the wrong way. To correct Yuki's understanding of the front, Blacksmith firstly condemns him for underrating the Olympus front, and then tells Yuki that there's a reward meant for the winner of the Olympus front. Yuki, who hasn't discussed such a thing with Bandit before, asks Hephaestus what the reward is, but instead of answering him, Hephaestus turns to Bandit and asks why he hasn't told Yuki about the reward before involving him in the battle. To keep Yuki's head straight, Bandit tells him that's not something for them to discuss now, and Yuki, realizing Bandit's right, asks Blacksmith about Yui. When Blacksmith starts yapping nonsense again, Yuki reminds Rika about their plan and then gets ready for his battle. Knowing fully well that the skill of the 12 lords can't be stolen, Rika activates her power and waits for Yuki to prepare himself to get closer to Blacksmith, so he can touch him directly and peek into his memories to see what really happened. To prevent Yuki from doing that, Blacksmith makes the first move by slamming his hammer into the ground, activating his Hellfire Craftsman skill, and engulfing the entire room in flames. With no time to waste, Yuki, who'd already seen this coming, tries dodging the fire, but unfortunately for him, Blacksmith already knew he'd try to dodge. So, just when Yuki thinks he's safe, Blacksmith tracks him and slams his head to the ground with his hammer. Despite being down, Yuki stretches out his hand to touch the bozo, but Blacksmith, quickly spotting his hand, jumps to safety. After seeing the Blacksmith fight, Yuki pieces together all the weird things about the guy's personality and concludes that bro must be quite experienced in combat. Soon enough, Rika helps Yuki back up and makes sure he's okay. Now that he knows Blacksmith won't let him touch him easily, Yuki decides to use a pre-planned weakness of Blacksmith's in his next attack. With this in mind, he tells Rika to stand right behind him and continue using her healing powers on him, even if the odds against him are pretty bad. As Rika struggles to understand what he just said, Yuki, hoping to use Blacksmith's confidence against him, trash talks his firepower and challenges him into a battle of attrition to see which power is stronger, Blacksmith's firepower or his endurance. When Rika tries to warn him just how dangerous that is, Yuki urges her not to worry about him, and instead, focuses on keeping her ability ongoing the entire time. Just then, Blacksmith smashes the head of one of his statues, calls Yuki a slow-witted youngster, and accepts his bet. Almost instantly, bro unleashes a massive wave of hellfire flames and wraps them around Yuki. As Yuki's entire body suffers heavy burns from the hellish flames, Blacksmith cackles, enjoying every bit of pain and suffering Yuki is enduring currently, and asks him how it feels. Not too long after Yuki gets engulfed by the flames, Rika activates her healing abilities and constantly heals Yuki up, as he walks defiantly in Blacksmith's flames. The moment Blacksmith recognizes the recovery ability to be from Demeter, he increases the flame flame's temperature and continues burning Yuuki. Along the line, Yuuki figures she can't keep the treatment up because the flames are too strong, so she warns Yuuki to be quick with his plans, as she can't hold on any longer. As the burns increasingly get too severe for him, Yuuki encourages himself to stay alive, so he can find out and expose Yui's truth. When Blacksmith spots Yuuki fighting through the flames by sheer will alone, he takes his attack up a notch by slamming his fiery hammer into Yuuki's body and boasting about his victory. While he's at it, Yuki, who's already gotten close enough to the guy, gives Rika the signal to carry out the next phase of the plan, and almost instantly, Rika restrains Blacksmith's body in tree branches, giving Yuuki a chance at achieving revenge, even if it brings his death. When Blacksmith realizes what Yuuki's plan is, he tries to land a fatal hit on him with his hammer, but then Yuuki, trusting Rika's insane recovery ability to keep the tree branches up to continue restraining Blacksmith, figures he's going to be very okay as long as Rika keeps activating the ability. As Blacksmith continues struggling to free himself from Rika's annoying branches, Yuuki watches the guy suffer for a little while, and then, when he gets satisfied, makes a move to turn Blacksmith into one of his sick artworks. In a last-minute effort to stop Yuuki from churning his insides out, Blacksmith drops his fiery hammer on the floor while telling Yuuki just how useless his plan is, and then uses the hammer to continue igniting the fire that spreads all over the room. Right after seeing the terrified looks on Yuuki and Rika's faces, Blacksmith cackles like the devil and lets them know that they just can't seal him there with branches, as long as he has the hammer around him, because he can easily ignite it whenever he wishes. Following this, he then moves on to tell Yuuki that he'll burn away all the mere branches with the igniting fire, fully expecting the teens to be even more scared. Unfortunately for him, however, Rika, who remains unfazed by the whole fire situation, remembers what Yuuki told her back at the canal about combining her power with the secret ninja bag ability he just unlocked to win against Hephaestus. Apparently, a few moments before they left the canal for 4th Street, Yuuki stored almost 1,000 gallons of canal water in his secret ninja bag and told Rika, who was curious at the time, that he was only making plans to use Hephaestus's weakness to counter his overwhelming firepower when the time came. So, while Yuuki boldly lunges at Blacksmith, who's still tied to a huge tree via its branches, he recalls every bit of information about skills, abilities, and their weaknesses, and, upon warning Rika to step back, activates the secret ninja bag skill. Soon after activating the skill, Yuuki lets out the 1,000 gallons of canal water he'd stored in the 4-dimensional space beforehand, and practically bathes the Blacksmith, his useless hammer, and his deity, Hephaestus, for minutes till he exhausts his supply. Eventually, when Yuuki's done bathing the Blacksmith, Rika uses one of her branches to help him all the way back up, so he doesn't fall off the ceiling where he's at. Seeing this, Yuuki and Rika exchange winks to approve each other for their support, and Yuuki reminds himself that even if one's a human with abilities stronger than most, nobody can beat nature. Noting this, he encourages himself even further to win the Olympus front, no matter what strategy he uses, and makes sure that he never forgives those who took his sister from him. So, with the Blacksmith down, Yuuki inches closer to him and touches him, while activating the upgraded silent mind reading skill, malicious voyeurism, to read his mind. In one of Blacksmith's memories, Yuuki spots Blacksmith and his master, Hephaestus, discussing a weird deal with another one of the 12 deities, Poseidon, with Blacksmith talking about a new trident he crafted for the deity of the sea, and assuring him that the trident is made with top-grade steel. Moments before the proud sea deity speaks, Hephaestus calls him out on taking his host's personality, but then Poseidon, who didn't really care what Heph thought, boldly tells him he took the personality without any remorse. To avoid getting into any trouble with the deity of the sea, Blacksmith instantly considers his contract with Poseidon fulfilled, and Poseidon, happy to hear this, praises his subordinate deity's host to be very good at his craft. Following that, he promises to keep both Heph and his host alive as long as their skills don't deteriorate. With Heph and Blacksmith remaining silent, Poseidon, who's now gotten his new weapon, moves on to begin his first phase of his plan, which is disposing of the other lords and the surrounding humans. 2. The moment Yuuki hears Poseidon, who he thinks is just another random deity, talk about offing the humans surrounding the other deities, he instantly figures it all out. Poseidon is the mastermind behind his sister, Yui's death. With this new information, Yuuki turns to Rika, after reading Blacksmith's memories, and tells her that the Blacksmith was only making weapons for a separate perpetrator called Poseidon. Now to the million-dollar question, where is Poseidon, the real culprit, right now? Well, just as they're about to figure out his location, Blacksmith sneaks behind Yuuki and attacks his blind spot. Luckily for Yuuki, Bandit spots Blacksmith and warns him, As Rika screams Yuuki's name, urging him to be careful, Blacksmith raises his iron hammer to deliver the final blow that'll kill Yuuki. Unfortunately for him, however, Poseidon pops out of a portal in the nick of time and kills Blacksmith just moments before he kills Yuuki, because to him, Blacksmith's already fulfilled his purpose, so he's no longer needed. Soon after killing Blacksmith, Poseidon faces Yuuki and Rika alongside their lords, mutters something about life being too precious to waste on losers, and then asks both humans if they're also hosts for their deities. Rather than answer Poseidon's questions, Yuuki, who didn't know the deity standing before him, just stands there, confused, and asks Bandit to explain why this weird-looking guy is suddenly standing before them. In response, Bandit lets Yuki know that they're in deep shit because the guy standing in front of them is the legendary Poseidon, the strongest lord to have ever lived. When Rika sees the expression on Poseidon's face, she gasps in horror, as Demeter, her host, explains that Poseidon's definitely taken his host's personality. By this time, Yuuki remembers Poseidon to be the guy he saw in Blacksmith's memory, so he asks him if he's the one who killed his sister. But then Poseidon, refusing to answer a mere mortal's question, baits Yuuki to repeat his question. Unfazed, Yuuki boldly tells Poseidon that Yui's his sister, and he's asking the bastard if he'd killed her at some point. Hearing this, Poseidon condemns humans and their flimsy feelings, and then tells Yuuki that there's no way he'd remember each one of the countless lives he's taken on his way to the top. At this point, Yuuki realizes there's no reasoning with this bastard. So, to make him remember his sister's identity, he lunges at Poseidon, activating the upgraded Silent Mind reading skill, and punches the Lord. Although Yuuki feels his fist getting stuck in some sort of barrier at first, he fights through the pain and ensures he touches Poseidon, so his activated ability can work. Eventually, when he does get a peek at his memories, he spots Poseidon standing in the midst of a massacre he just caused, when suddenly, Yui happens to walk in at the worst possible time. At that time, Yui was visibly terrified to see so many people killed by a mythical-looking creature, so instead of hiding herself, she made a funny sound that alerted Poseidon. Since she'd already seen him kill all those people, Poseidon, who didn't like leaving loose ends, killed the innocent young lady. As Yuuki ends the memory recap, he hears his sister's last words, as she screams his name to come save her from the scary man. By this time, Yuuki finally realizes that Poseidon is not just his sister's killer, but he's also caused the deaths of thousands of other humans. Soon enough, Poseidon gets irritated at Yuki for getting in his way, so he pins Yuki down and makes a move to stab him right through with his trident. Luckily for Yuuki, Rika uses her Earth's Compassion skill to create some branches that restrain Poseidon and his trident, giving Yuuki and her enough time to escape being killed. Once she spots their window, Rika gives the signal, as she claims her branches won't hold for long, and urges them to escape the fight now that they still have the chance. Initially, Yuuki really didn't want to leave because of his revenge, but thankfully, Bandit talks some sense into the emotional Nimrod, citing that he should worry more about protecting Rika that instant, and Yuuki, realizing that he's right, proceeds to escape with her. By the time they begin their escape, Poseidon was already breaking himself from the branches, holding him down. With no time to waste, Yuuki, upon figuring out that Poseidon truly isn't human, cuts his losses and ultimately ends up retreating to Rika's house, with everyone safe. Upon settling at Rika's house, Yuuki tells Rika, while she heals his wounds, that Poseidon wasn't thinking about anything when he peeked into his memories. As the healing ritual continues, Rika asks her lord if other deities really don't think about people. Well, Demeter tells the humans in the room not to be surprised that there are deities who feel nothing when killing people. To support her claim, Bandit assures them that Poseidon truly does think nothing of humans because all he cares about is standing at the top of all lords. Well, since that's the bozo's disposition, Yuuki decides to force him to understand how important humans are to his existence by killing him for killing Yui in the first place. While Rika stares at his angry face, Yuuki immediately starts thinking about the first phase of his plan, which is gathering information. To find out more information about that lord, he calls Jinta to Rika's house to pick his brain on finding Poseidon's weakness. When Jinta gets there, he politely asks Yuuki if it's okay to intrude on a woman's room when meeting her for the first time, and Rika, touched by his politeness, happily permits Jinta to make himself comfortable. As Yuuki thinks about explaining things to Jinta, Jinta, on the other hand, asks him who the floating people on his and Rika's side are. Bandit instantly tells him that they're both lords, and Jinta nearly collapses from excitement. By this time, Yuuki asks Bandit why Jinta can see them, and he says it's because they allowed him to recognize them visually. Fine with that, Yuuki still wonders how he's going to make Jinta believe everything that's happened so far, even if he is a Lord Otaku. But to his surprise, Jinta gets super excited to find out that the lords he believed in actually existed. Over the next hour, Yuuki explains everything to Jinta and then asks him, being the knowledgeable one, to tell him if there is a lord who can defeat Poseidon. Unfortunately for him, Hinta tells him that a lord who can defeat Poseidon doesn't exist, and this leaves Yuuki stunned. Despite breaking the bad news to Yuuki and his lady friend, Jinta does his due diligence by telling Yuuki and Rika all there is to know about the Lord of the Sea. Being the only lord who governs over 70% of the earth, aka the ocean, Jinta tells his buddies that Poseidon possesses power over tsunamis, storms, and is said to be able to swallow entire continents using only his freaking trident. For all he knows, Poseidon is the only lord that fears the Lord of Death. Hades can't stand. So, defeating someone, or something like that, is practically impossible. In addition to what he just said, Jinta tells Yuki that, although he heard of Demeter to be one of the 12 lords, he's never read about Bandit in any mythological books. By this time, Bandit apologizes for being unknown. But then Jinta moves on to talk about the Olympus Front, which he calls a battle that grants a valuable reward to its survivor. Upon hearing Jinta talk about the Olympus Front, Yuuki suddenly remembers what Blacksmith told him about the obtainable reward if he wins the Olympus Front, and Rika, knowing what the reward is, openly tells Yuuki that only one wish of the host who wins the battle can be granted, no matter what it is. As Yuki slowly digests this new information, Jinta made, right, the Olympus Front Battle of the Lords, and Demeter asks Bandit why he didn't tell Yuki about the reward, especially after knowing that Yuuki's lost someone before. In his defense, Bandit says it's because Yuuki didn't volunteer to participate in the battle in the first place. In other words, Bandit claims that he's the one who got Yuuki involved, while Demeter continues scolding Bandit for being a bad lord. Yuki, on the other hand, zones out and thinks about what happens if he wins the battle and gets the wish. Just then, Yuuki, who's made his decision to win the front, calls Bandit and tells him that if he wins the Olympus Front, then he's definitely going to bring Yui back to life once more, so he can at least see that smile of hers. Around that same time, Demeter tells Yuuki that Rika's also working hard to win, so she can also bring her deceased mother back to life. The moment Yuuki hears this, he stares at poor Rika in shock and sympathy, as he suddenly realizes how much of a selfish asshole he's being to her. After a brief silence, Jinta asks Bandit if both of them can win, and Bandit says it's impossible, simply because there can be only one winner. Because that's just how the Olympus Front is. Even still, Jinta reminds them that they still need to defeat Poseidon first, and Rika, relieved to actually be reminded of that, tells Yuki that they still need to worry about beating the piece of shit lord first. With this, Yuuki clenches his fist and encourages himself to get revenge on Poseidon, the one who murdered Yui first, before defeating the other lords. With all that said, Demeter urges him to look at her host, Rika's abilities, citing that they're completely useless. And while Rika feels super embarrassed for being called out like that, Bandit, on the other hand, tells her to reveal the other abilities she has in her skill chart. Upon hearing this, Rika gets a little nervous for some reason, and, after telling the bunch how she really didn't want them to see her charts, opens up her skill charts, only for everyone there to see that she only has 2 unlockable abilities. For a moment, the entire room stays shocked at how useless her abilities actually are. But eventually, Bandit clears the air, and Demeter doubles down on condemning her own host. Moments later, Jinta urges both girls to stop fighting, but while he's at it, Yuuki thinks about the many abilities he's acquired so far. Although he has many, Yuuki feels none of them is actually good enough to defeat Poseidon. For a moment, he browses through a good ability he can use in combat, which is the stolen goods borrowing skill, which can make all stolen abilities his forever. But after seeing the acquisition condition, which requires all his stats to become F rank, Yuuki knows it's useless against Poseidon. Upon sifting through other abilities and their acquisition conditions, Yuuki gets even more confused and just gives up on the entire thing. Just then, Jinta speaks up to tell the bunch about Poseidon's wife, and Rika, shocked, asks him if lords also can get married. After assuring her, with an explanation, that they can, Jinta moves on to tells them that the lord, who's known to have lovers with Poseidon quarrels, is none other than Demeter. Thankfully, Demeter doesn't deny this fact, as she reveals to everyone in the room that she is Poseidon's ex-wife. Although shocked to hear this, Rika asks her why she never said a word about the guy, and Demeter says it's because she never wanted to talk about the man who killed her daughter. At this point, Yuuki gets disgusted, as he just found out how horrible a deity Poseidon really is. In a flashback, Demeter explains the day that the bastard of a deity killed her only daughter. That day was as normal as any other day in the divine realm, because Demeter and her daughter lived a quiet but happy life. Then, around midday, Poseidon appeared before them while they were playing in the green fields, and suddenly demanded, out of nowhere, that Demeter bear his child. Before Demeter could even respond to his advances, Poseidon subdued her with his immense power and killed her daughter behind her back. Some minutes after everything, Demeter regained her senses and asked Poseidon to reveal her daughter to her, so she could at least have her back. By this time, Poseidon starts his deity yap about Demeter's daughter being a brave, but weak child, and then, after telling Demeter that weak lords are unnecessary, he reveals the horrifying reality that still haunts Demeter till even now, the image of her deceased daughter already impaled by Poseidon's trident. Soon after killing her daughter, Poseidon concludes that Demeter and her daughter are inadequate vessels to carry his offspring, so he leaves shortly after, and allows Demeter to mourn her daughter, who had just died for nothing. In the aftermath, Demeter says Poseidon left that place to find a woman worthy as a vessel for his offspring, and ended up picking some woman somewhere again. At this point, upon hearing everything, Rika crashes out over how cruel the bastard was to poor Demeter, and Jinta tries to calm her down, seeing as mythology has a lot of that kind of thing happening from time to time. Around this time, Demeter and Yuuki yap over how disgusting Poseidon is, who shows no mercy even to children, and Yuuki, having heard the entire story, figures they have to stop Poseidon, no matter what. The only problem now is how to defeat him. Hours later, Yuuki returns to his house and offers prayers to his dad's and Yui's spirits, promising revenge against those who caused them to die. Internally, he knows he and Rika definitely can't win at their current level, so while he racks his brains, looking for a way to defeat them, Bandit appears beside him and lets him know that it's meaningless if they can't win like before. Well, no shit they can't. Of course, Yuuki knows what's at stake here. So, while Bandit acts like Yuuki's problem isn't his problem, Yuuki, on the other hand, starts thinking about Poseidon's possible weaknesses. At first, he suggests they use lightning against Poseidon's water powers, but Bandit reminds him that Poseidon's not some monster in a pocket somewhere. Just before they continue racking their brains, Jinta arrives at Yuuki's door in a hurry and bangs his room door, urging him to open up as if something bad had happened. The moment Yuuki opens up for him, Jinta rushes into the house and places Rika's petrified figure in a corner of the room. Shocked, Yuuki, who thought the weird Rika sculpture was just some terrible art joke, asks Jinta to explain what the hell it is, but after hearing Jinta's explanation, Yuki finally realizes that Rika has turned to stone. With this, he asks Jinta to explain what exactly happened, and Jinta tells him that on his way back home from their meeting, he realized that he forgot something at Rika's house, so he went back to get it. However, when he got to the street where Rika's house is, and was thinking about how nerve-wracking it was for him to go see a girl by himself, he heard Rika screaming near her house, demanding to know exactly who the unknown entity confronting her was. Almost instantly, Jinta recognizes Rika's voice, and hides behind a corner to avoid getting himself in trouble. Eventually, when he peeks out of the corner, he spots a female lord with sneaks in her hair, oozing a pinkish aura around her, looming over poor Rika, who's just as confused as Jinta, and hears her introducing herself as Poseidon's woman. While a terrified Rika begs her to explain what she's trying to say, Jinta returns to his hiding spot, scared shitless, as he tries to figure out what the hell that pinkish deity island. As he continues thinking about the Olympus front and the battle between lords, he ultimately concludes that whoever that thing is, it is a full-blown monster. Given the fact that Rika's currently in danger, Jinta knows that even if he goes out there to save her, he can't help her out because he has no power. When he starts thinking about Yuuki, Jinta suddenly remembers that Yuuki wasn't strong from the beginning, either. If anything, Jinta knows that he was bullied just like him, and still ended up beating Akira to become incredibly strong. Also, the fact that Yuuki trusted and told him about this battle must mean that he believes Jinta can be someone worthy of being his friend, too. That being said, Jinta gets encouraged to rush out and help Rika, but unfortunately for him, by the time he rushed out, he only found a petrified Rika, oozing out a pinkish aura with the deity gone. Upon realizing that Rika was turned to stone because of the deity, Jinta figures that the person must be one of Poseidon's allies. Shocked to hear this, Yuuki gets really confused and asks Jinta to describe what the lord looked like. As soon as he hears Jinta's description, a woman with long hair, constantly muttering something, Yuki gets very spooked. Just then, Yuuki's doorbell rings, scaring the guys, and Yuuki and Jinta wonder who could have the guts to visit them at this hour. When Yuuki checks the doorbell camera, he finds no one at the door and gets even more scared. Before long, the identified female lord appears behind them and introduces herself as Poseidon's woman Medusa, and Yuuki, who looks back to see the ugly thing, freaks out even more. With no time to waste, Jinta tells Yuuki that Medusa's the one who petrified Rika, and then asks him what he thinks they can do. In response, Yuuki tells him that they have to defeat her right there, but Jinta, knowing that would be a foolish idea, grabs Yuuki and urges him to calm down first. Not too long after, they look around the corner where Medusa's at, and soon notice that she's no longer there. As they scan around the room, trying to find her, Medusa appears behind them, saying nonsense about making Poseidon's enemies her enemies, and attacks both of them instantly. Luckily, Jinta pushes Yuuki out of the way on time, just as he's about to attack Medusa, and urges Yuuki to retreat for now so they can reorganize their formation. before Yuuki can even argue his idea. However, Jinta gets himself and Yuuki out of the room and blocks the door with a heavy object. Once they're safe, Yuuki asks him if he knows what the hell that thing is, and Jinta tells him that she's Medusa, a female deity who can petrify people just by making eye contact with them. When Yuuki expresses obvious concern about this ridiculousness of the power, Jinta tells him that she petrifies people using the snakes on her head and is particularly famous in mythology. On top of all that, it's been written in the history books that she's also Poseidon's mistress, which escalates the danger of their current situation. Soon after divulging everything he knows about the deity, Jinta asks Yuki what he's planning to do about her, and Yuki tells him that they have no choice but to defeat her since she's Poseidon's ally. Hearing this, Jinta suggests that they take a different path and try to reconcile with her instead, rather than fighting her. But Yuuki tells him that there's no way one can reason with such a dangerous person, especially if she's Poseidon's ally. Just then, Jinta screams at Yuuki, telling him that Medusa's actually a victim of circumstance, not Poseidon's true ally, and then moves on to tell him why. Apparently, Medusa used to be a woman with beautiful, long hair and beauty, but, somewhere along the line, she incurred the wrath of the other deities for committing adultery in a forbidden area. Ultimately, only Medusa was punished by turning her beautiful hair into snakes, just so she couldn't fall in love with anyone else. Aside from that, her beautiful eyes were also changed into eyes that turned people to stone, plunging her into a world of loneliness and strife. As a person who's had a similar lifestyle at school, Jinta tells Yuuki that he understands Medusa's sadness, the loneliness of no one being able to meet her eyes, and then adds that beating her up and defeating her might be too much, since she's a victim. Just as Yuuki's about to respond, Bandit interrupts their conversation and tells them that they have to defeat the caster of the petrifying magic to turn Rika back to normal. In other words, if they defeat Medusa, then they can reverse the petrification. With this, Yuuki figures that no matter how much of Poseidon's victim Medusa was, they still have to defeat her to save Rika. Not too long after he makes this realization, Medusa's snakes seep out from all the crevices around the door and bite Jinta and Yuuki all over their bodies. Once Yuuki realizes that the snakes are endlessly coming through every gap and biting them, he and Jinta get up to find ways to destroy them. Soon enough, Medusa appears inside the same room they're in, lets them know that snakes can slip through even the smallest gaps, and then asks them if they're really Poseidon's enemies. By this time, both Yuuki and Jinta cover their eyes to avoid looking directly at Medusa, but Medusa says that even though she has no grudge against them, she still needs to eliminate them because they're Poseidon's enemies. At this point, Yuuki figures there's no saving her anymore because even after being deceived by the useless deity, she's still devoted to Poseidon. With this, he swings a punch her way, relying only on the sounds he hears from her, only to end up punching Jinta in the face after she dodges his attack. When Yuuki realizes that he just punched his friend, Jinta, he opens his eyes accidentally, upon recognizing the voice, and asks Jinta if he's the one he just punched. Once Jinta gets back on his feet, he faces Yuuki and advises that they think of another way to tackle this, so they can work together as comrades. Around that same time, Yuuki completes the acquisition conditions for the skill, Black Dealer Stolen Goods Trading, which gives him the ability to buy and sell stolen abilities, and instantly unlocks the ability to give the abilities he's stolen earlier to someone else. As Jinta tells him to consider talking some sense into her head, Medusa unleashes her deadly eye powers on them, revealing that she has partner petrifying, enchanting eyes, and then moves on to petrify both of them. Without any hesitation, Yuuki grabs Medusa's head, activates the skill, ability, borrowing, and steals Medusa's deity powers to petrify people. Thereafter, Yuuki, with no other choice but to bet on Jinta, his friend, activates the Black Dealer skill, the stolen goods trading skill that he just unlocked, and releases Medusa's powers to Jinta, so he can use them to defeat Medusa. As Yuuki turns to stone, Jinta receives an ability status window, and spends the next few seconds trying to understand what the hell he's seeing.